Apocalypse. I can steal superpowers. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 301, How to Use the Magic Stick. The morning faded, and the sunshine of the new spring still had a bit of coolness. GLUO sat at the welcoming position at the door, crossed his legs, and read online novels boredly. It must be said that even as an evolver, as a person with real superpowers, reading online novels is still a very enjoyable pastime. In other words, it is precisely because of the power that one craves for power more. When ordinary people read novels about urban superpowers, at most they had some fantasy pleasure, but no matter what, they know that what is described in the novel is fake and has nothing to do with them. After the fantasy, they still have to face the cruel reality and continue to move bricks. But GLUO is different. He is a real evolver. When that guy reads online novels, the sense of substitution directly extends to reality. Who knows, one day he will suddenly become enlightened, his realm will be 1,000 miles away, and he will directly become the strongest person in the world and sweep everything. Don't say anything, it's invincible, lonely. GLUO couldn't help sighing when he saw the refreshing place. He picked up the drink on the table and gulped down half a bottle. Cool. GLUO smacked his lips, moved his chair, and prepared to continue watching. However, just as GLUO put the drink back on the table, he suddenly felt something. GLUO raised his eyebrows, put down his phone, and stood up from his chair. Only then did he confirm that his feeling was correct. Just in front of the front desk, a short elementary school student was standing there. He was not even as tall as the table, looking up at GLUO without saying a word. "Little friend, what can I do for you?" GLUO put his elbows on the table, supported his cheeks, bent over, and communicated with the customer very lazily. "I'm not a little friend. My name is Lu Yian, and I'm 8 years old this year." The child's voice was crisp, and he was not afraid of GLUO, the big guy. Although his clothes were a little old, they were very clean. From the rolled up sleeves, GLUO could see that the clothes should have been picked from other relatives' children. But Lu Yian's mother must be very diligent, and the clothes were very clean. "Well, he's 8 years old, you beat him. So Lu Yian, what's the matter with you coming here?" GLUO is not a very patient person with children, but he admires children like Lu Yian because he has been poor and knows how difficult life is. Children from such a background as Lu Yian must have encountered a lot of prejudice and contempt. GLUO likes that he can still maintain courage and sharpness in this situation. I heard from others that you have a lot of powerful people here. After all, Lu Yian is only 8 years old, and when he speaks in a hurry, it's a little unclear. GLUO stretched out his hand to signal him not to be anxious and speak slowly. "Yes, we have a lot of powerful people here." GLUO knew without thinking that the incident of Zuyi beating the gangsters a few days ago must have spread. No wonder no one around them rushed over these days. Good guy, did they think they were a den of evil forces? What a joke. We are a jack of all trades here to serve the people. How can you think so? Moreover, you see, we are so close to the people that we even receive 8-year-old children well. Lu Yian, here we are a place dedicated to upholding justice, and everyone is a hero. Then I want to ask you, you special people, do you know the magic stick? Lu Yian didn't really understand what GLUO meant by upholding justice, but he understood what a hero was, so the child laughed happily, as if he had finally found the right place. Magic stick. What is that? GLUO always felt that the name was a little familiar, but he couldn't remember it. It's the transformation device. Ultraman's voice changer. Oh, I remember. Boil the bones into soup, and we turn into light. I know this. GLUO didn't think the child was boring. He propped up his cheek and nodded solemnly. "So, Lu Yian, what's wrong with the magic stick?" I picked up a magic stick 2 days ago, and I want to know why I can't become Ultraman." The child was a little embarrassed to tell GLUO that his magic stick was picked up. He lowered his head and didn't dare to look at GLUO. "HMM. Can't it be transformed?" Is it broken? Let me see. Jialuo did not think that Lu Yuan had stolen something because he was embarrassed. From the child's eyes, Jialuo saw stubbornness and shyness and did not dodge. The child nodded and took out a plastic toy from his pocket. Although the appearance was indeed a magic stick, it was indeed a bit shoddy, and the surface was broken, and even the lighting effect was gone. It was obviously something that had been thrown away. Big brother, how is it? The child's eyes widened, as if he was very eager to get an answer. Jialuo took the magic stick, flipped through it, and nodded seriously, as if he really understood something. Lu Yuan, this magic stick should have been usable, and its previous owner must have used it to transform into a cosmic hero. It's just what? The child clenched his fists expectantly, as if he had received some incredible news. Jialuo rubbed his chin and sighed pretentiously. It's just that its previous director betrayed the path of light, violated the oath of justice, and betrayed the glory and virtue of heroes. So, he lost his power, and the stick of light was broken. Jialuo pointed to the crack on the top of the plastic toy, as if to tell him that the previous owner of the stick of light had betrayed light, which led to the crack here. Then, big brother, can it still be used for transformation? Well, why do you want to transform into Ultraman? What do you want to do with this power? Jialuo put the plastic toy on the table and looked at Lu Yuan solemnly. The child felt uncomfortable under Jialuo's stare and took a step back. There is a little fat boy in my class who always laughs at me. I beat him up yesterday. He wants to bring people to block me after school today, but I can't beat them. Oh, so that's how it is. Where did you hit him? This and this. Lu Yuan pointed to his arm and then to his thigh. Jialuo asked him if the fat boy was bleeding, and the child shook his head. Is that so? It seems that the other party is fine, but he just can't get over it. Jialuo rubbed his chin, looking like he was thinking. Of course, he was indeed thinking. Don't underestimate children. Although children are not very old, they are very vain. Those among them who like to be the leaders are all very vain. If they lose face, they will definitely get it back. Thinking about it this way, Lu Yuan is really in trouble. Chapter 302. Going out. Lu Yuan, I understand your situation. First of all, I have to tell you with regret. Jialuo stretched out his hand and scratched his hair, pretending to be very embarrassed. The child stared at Jialuo nervously and forgot to breathe for a while. You can't transform into a cosmic hero. First of all, this magic stick is broken. Secondly, even if the magic stick is not broken, you can't transform. Why? Because you have lost the qualification to be a hero. Jialuo stood up and looked down at the boy's short body with an absolute advantage in height, full of momentum. Heroes are born to protect others. When you only think about using strength to defeat others, you have lost the possibility of becoming a hero. How can you become light? Lu Yuan actually didn't quite understand Jialuo's words, but he knew that Ultraman had always transformed to protect the Earth. He only thought about fighting with others, so it was impossible for him to have that power. I understand. Lu Yuan nodded heavily, as if he really understood what Jialuo wanted to tell him. He blinked and looked like he was about to cry. Big brother, is there really Ultraman in this world? They all say it's fake. Of course there is, don't they know that? Jialuo frowned, as if he had discovered something very serious. Lu Yuan laughed happily, as if something important was confirmed. Really? That's great. Ultraman really exists? The little boy laughed and cried. He wiped his tears and looked aggrieved and happy. Jialuo looked at the little boy's joy calmly. He didn't tease the child in his heart, but sighed helplessly. The kindness of children is pure and beautiful, but the evil of children is also pure terror. Children not only compare in vanity, they also exclude and bully. From I won't play with you to everyone ignore him. Because the children were simple-minded, they didn't think about the feeling of hurting others. They just rejected different people unscrupulously and took pleasure in it. The children who were really hurt were actually helpless to the extreme. Their little self-esteem made them choose silence. The only light in their hearts was probably the heroes in those fictional fantasies. Because they were weak, they yearned for heroes. Because they were in the dark, they prayed for light. Lu Yuan, Since you can pick up this magic stick, it proves that you also have the potential to become a hero. But, whether you will lose this qualification in the future, or one day, you will become light with it all depends on you. GLUO put the broken plastic toy in his hand, and handed it to Lu Yian. The little boy looked up at GLUO, nodded heavily, and took the magic stick. I will work hard. I want to be a hero. Then I look forward to it. I hope you can become a hero with it one day. GLUO really likes the determination flashing in the little boy's eyes at this moment. That is really the purest and simplest color, just like the night on the riverbank, the water ripples, reflecting the moonlight, the color without the slightest dust, beautiful as hope. Well, big brother, thank you. I'm going to school. The little boy was obviously afraid, and did not go to school as usual. It was almost 10 o'clock now, and the third class was probably about to start. Wait a minute, that little fat boy is going to block you. Is it after school at noon, or in the evening? GLUO yawned, looking lazy and stretched, as if he was planning to go out, after staying at home for a month. It should be after school at noon. He seems to be looking for a 6th year college student to beat me. 6th year college student? Oh, an older student. GLUO almost misunderstood his words, because he had not had much contact with elementary school students. Fortunately, GLUO reacted quickly, and did not make a fool of himself. It's past 10 now. You will finish school at 11:30, so there won't be much time left. Come on, I'll go with you. GLUO opened the remaining drink, and drank it all in one gulp. Then he put his phone in his pocket, and prepared to go out. Big brother, me. What's wrong with me? Don't you know that passage? One day, you will be with us, shuttle side by side between death and doomsday. Before that, we will be your shield. GLUO changed a line from Ultraman. The little boy obviously heard this passage and laughed happily. Thank you, Taro. You are pretty good, kid. GLUO walked to the little boy, and rubbed his round head. Don't say, the hair of an 8-year-old child is very soft. Although it is short, it feels good. By the way, I'll leave a note. GLUO didn't want to run upstairs to inform Kyo-Junian, so he simply wrote a note and put it on the table. Okay, let's go have lunch first. Without lunch, how can we have the energy to save the world? GLUO reached out and grabbed the little boy's hand. Lu Yian shook it off embarrassedly, but he didn't break free. The little boy was pulled by GLUO, very embarrassed. The two walked out of the gate of the community, and he still lowered his head. GLUO was not surprised by this. Because of their ignorant nature, children actually long for the attention of adults. This kind of attention is taken for granted for children from normal families, but in some families with some deficiencies, the feeling of being cared for can almost be remembered for a lifetime. What do you want to eat? I'm a little sorry that I didn't fix your magic stick today, so I'll treat you. GLUO is not the kind of person who is full of saintly hearts. The reason why he helped Lu Yian was only because the little boy's stubbornness was exactly the same as when he was a child. People should not pity others without authorization, which is a stain on the efforts and strength of others. People often make subjective assumptions. They put others under their gaze and use pity as a pretext to express their sense of superiority. I'm not picky about food. Everything is fine with me. The little boy's mother was obviously very busy at work and didn't even have time to make lunch for him. The money for lunch must have been given to him, but this kind of child would always be hungry and spend the money on other miscellaneous items. Then, let's eat Uncle Ken. GLUO remembered that when he was a child, he also liked to eat fried chicken burgers the most, but when he was older, greasy things were enough, and they were delicious. However, in the eyes of children, fried chicken burgers are full of the most desired large pieces of meat, and they are fried fragrant and crispy, and with the color of the sauce, they are full of desire. The world has always been unfair, but most people take this unfairness for granted. Chapter 303, I need cooperation. Big brother, thank you. You are a good person. Lu Yian, who was only 8 years old, already had a basic understanding of good and evil. He could feel that GLUO was doing good for him, so he was grateful and happy. Just a good person? No, you are a hero. A super powerful hero. Lu Yian's smile was very bright. GLUO touched his head and pulled him into the fried chicken store. The child had obviously never been here before. He sat on the chair a little stiffly. GLUO flicked his forehead and stood up to order. Considering his appetite, GLUO ordered a lot. Almost all of the hamburgers that had just come out of the pot were cleared by himself. Other people who were ordering turned their heads and looked at GLUO as if they were looking at a lunatic. GLUO didn't care about other people's eyes. He slapped a dozen banknotes on the table, reminded the waiter to arrange the order, and also woke up the people who were staring at him. He always knows how to eat, and he always has money. What's wrong with that? Is it not okay? What are you looking at? Haven't you seen an evolver? GLUO used to control his food intake, but now, GLUO really let himself go. He didn't care about what other people thought. He just took the mountain of food and sat back in his seat. Eat more. If you don't have enough, order more. Big brother, this is too much. Why are you talking so much? Eat. GLUO snorted, took the burger, and started to eat, feeling very unhappy. It was not his fault that he could eat so much, it was the world's fault. With this awkward mentality, GLUO ate more vigorously. Although Lu Yuan liked to eat burgers, children had limited appetite. When he was almost done, he sat there and watched GLUO, watching him eat and eat for half an hour. Burp. Not bad, I'm half full. GLUO wiped his mouth, ignored the pile of burger paper in front of him, and pulled Lu Yuan out of the store. Big brother, you are so awesome. Lu Yuan turned his head and looked at GLUO with some amazement, some curiosity, and some admiration. In his little head, he couldn't understand why GLUO was so good at eating. After all, from the outside, GLUO looked very handsome, and he looked about 18 or 19 years old. Being able to eat is a blessing. When you can eat as much as I can, those who look down on you will turn to fear you. GLUO touched his slightly swollen belly and began to instill heresy into Lu Yuan, and the child really believed it, or in his heart, GLUO was like a hero of light, shining. The hero who saved him. So, Lu Yuan, you have to understand that learning knowledge is to be able to understand others scolding you when you quarrel, and exercising is to ensure that others will receive the punishment they deserve after scolding you. GLUO didn't really want to call Lu Yuan these. He just felt good talking, and the two walked along the road, walking through the crowd, like a pair of brothers with a good relationship. Lu Yuan looked at GLUO with admiration, and occasionally looked forward, as if he was regretting the approaching school. He wanted this road to extend infinitely, and this beautiful moment could last for a long time. I almost passed it. Is this your school? Yes. When Lu Yuan answered, he unconsciously held GLUO's hand tightly. GLUO leaned down, touched his head, and gave him a reassuring expression. School will be over in a few minutes. Go, tell that little fat boy to bring everyone he can call over. I will give him a lesson that he will remember for the rest of his life. GLUO patted Lu Yuan's shoulder like a person entrusted between men. The child nodded heavily and ran into the school with his small school bag on his back. What a courageous little bean. He is not afraid of being beaten. GLUO actually has many ways to solve this problem, but the one he finally implemented is the strangest and even the most unreasonable method. Because GLUO wants them to remember, truly remember for the rest of their lives. This world is a world where the strong prey on the weak, but the reason why countries are formed is because of the power of the weak. 99% of the weak are the main body of this world, and it is precisely because they are weak that they will obey the orders of others and be willing to be ruled by others. But on the other hand, the real reason why the weak are oppressed is not because of the strong, because the real strong stand at the top and cannot be seen at all. Those who oppress the weak must also be the weak. They are just stronger in some aspects, so they have to flatter the strong and whip the weak to prove, reveal, and consolidate their position. It is definitely not okay to bully children, so you need a little chicken with bared teeth and claws. GLUO looked around, looking for the teaching aids for his lectures. During the inspection, GLUO was glared at by a man selling watermelons in the distance. The man seemed to have a bad temper, and was very suitable to be a target. Should I go over and ask, is this melon ripe? GLUO had arranged everything, and then he realized that he seemed to have overlooked the importance and scarcity of a chicken in killing a chicken to scare the monkey. Is it my illusion? No one seems to be a good person. GLUO felt that he seemed to be a little agitated. He hurriedly leaned to the side and prepared to calm down, but he didn't expect that a figure suddenly ran out of the alley next to him and bumped into him head on. The person seemed to be hiding from someone. He ran while looking back, but he didn't look back at the road ahead and bumped into GLUO with a bang. Although GLUO looked handsome, his physical strength was completely incomparable to that of a normal person. The person was like hitting a wall, and he bounced back and fell to the ground. Ouch. The sweet-looking girl fell to the ground firmly. Because of the hasty situation, her right arm was just under her body. Under the weight of her body, she hit the exposed brick on the ground. Ah, my arm. The girl fell to the ground, moved her body, covered her arm, and burst into tears. GLUO could see that this was not a girl's outfit. She was not trying to scam people, but her arm was really broken. It was a bit unlucky, a bit coincidental, and a bit sloppy, but humans are indeed not as strong as imagined. Once the force is not right, it is easy to break bones. Are you okay? GLUO stretched out his hand and picked up the girl like a chicken. The girl was pretty, but she was a little short, probably only about 1.55 meters. Standing in front of GLUO, she was not even as high as his chin. The girl was wearing a high school uniform. GLUO knew it was at school as soon as he saw the ugly blue and white color combination. There was no way he had seen the school uniform of Tangruak's school, and it was just so ugly. And it was so expensive. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 304, Brilliant Spring. Wow, my arm hurts so much, it seems to be broken. The girl covered her arm and cried miserably. GLUO looked at her tearful face. Although he knew it was inappropriate, he still laughed. It's okay, don't worry, just remove the seemingly. GLUO reached out and grabbed the girl's right wrist. After a little exploration of the source of power, he got the absolutely correct answer. Your arm is indeed broken. The girl looked up, and the tears that were originally falling stopped instantly. She looked at GLUO in disbelief, as if she saw an alien creature. She had never seen such a bad mouth in her life. Her arm was broken, but he still laughed and said, don't worry, just remove the seemingly. Don't worry, it's not serious, it's just a slightly serious bone fracture. There is no dislocation, and no surgery is needed. Put on a plaster and hang it for 2 or 3 months. You are still young, and your bones grow fast, so there will be no sequelae. GLUO spoke very professionally, as if he had seen this situation countless times. The girl stared, thinking that GLUO was a doctor, and actually nodded with relief. Kyo Nuan, you can run away, but you can't run away from the temple. You don't care about your father's life or death, right? At this time, the people who followed the girl also caught up. There were 4 of them in total. They were dressed fairly ordinary, but you could tell from their aura that they were not good people. Kyo Nuan, our boss Yan's patience is limited. The conditions we give you are already generous enough. Your father owes a lot of money. Today, you stop. Wait a minute. He pulled the girl with the broken arm behind him, and then reached out to stop the gangsters beeping, as if some NPC voice was skipped. You 4 are bad guys. Hey, are you crazy? The gangsters were all amused by GLUO's words. Is this guy mentally ill? How can you ask questions like this? Are they bad guys? Can't he tell whether they are bad guys or not? How you dare to scold me? I've seen a lot of bad guys, but not many bad guys who scold me. GLUO was determined not to give the other side a chance to show off. Anyway, they were all supporting roles and would be beaten later. It would be very uncomfortable for him to show off. It would be better for him to show off himself and leave them with nothing to show off. Because they are all gone. GLUO blew a breath, expressing the meaning of being reduced to ashes. Looking at GLUO's expression, let alone the four gangsters, even Kairo Nguyen on the other side felt that GLUO was a lunatic. She moved to the wall, as if she was afraid of infecting her with mental retardation. Big brother, I brought them here. When no one was paying attention, the elementary school was on holiday. Lu Yuan came over with a swagger, followed by a little fat boy. There were 2 students of similar age next to the fat boy, and 3 children behind him were obviously not as tall as him. They were obviously 6th grade students. Hey, Lu Yuan, you're here at the right time. GLUO turned around and waved his hand, motioning Lu Yuan to come over. The little boy looked at the 4 thugs on the other side who didn't look like good people and ran to GLUO. Student Lu Yuan, you're great. You didn't get beaten when you called for help. I said my brother is outside. They can beat me, but my brother will beat them twice as hard and beat them to pieces later. Lu Yuan stood beside GLUO. GLUO touched his head and motioned him to go to Kairo Nguyen. On the other side, the 4 gangsters had no idea what GLUO wanted to do. They were about to take action, but the appearance of several elementary school students made them a little hesitant. There was no problem in beating GLUO, but if the fight hurt the children, it would be troublesome. Moreover, they were a little curious about GLUO's methods, so they stood aside and quietly picked up the bricks on the ground, preparing to tell GLUO what spring is. As for GLUO, at this time he didn't care whether the gangsters would attack secretly or not. He walked in front of a group of elementary school students and looked down at these little kids with different expressions. I tell you, my dad is awesome. If you dare to hit me, you're finished. Although the little fat boy is only 8 years old, he has a very flexible mind. Although he speaks toughly, it sounds like he is submissive. Of course, you are flexible. I thought you would beat him up first. GLUO looked at the fat boy with interest. He didn't have much contact with children, but the performance of the fat boy really impressed him. Is this what it means, that each generation is better than the last? In GLUO's era, the fat boy's age would probably still be playing in the mud all day. Really, playing in the mud, roasting ants, or stealing sweet potatoes to roast. Anyway, he didn't have such clear ideas. I never hit him. He hit me first. The little fat man was still a little afraid of GLUO. His voice softened a little, and he stretched out his arms to express that he was the victim. It's well reasoned and clear. It's good GLUO really sighed a little. The rich people are really rich. They don't care how they indulge their children, but most of the things they teach are not stereotyped. To put it bluntly, they don't care whether it is right or not. The important thing is to solve the problem. Little fat man, I tell you, Lu Yuan, I will follow it in the future. If you move him in the future, I will let you become the 4 people on the opposite side. GLUO pointed at the 4 hooligans who were confused. That attitude was simply treating the 4 of them as targets, or teaching props. The 4 of them are not. The little fat man wanted to refute GLUO, but before he finished speaking, GLUO moved. In the last second, GLUO's face was still thinking about the little fat man, and his hand was still pointing at the 4 hooligans, but the next moment, GLUO seemed to have simulated it countless times. He grabbed to the side with his right hand and directly picked up 2 bricks up. GLUO didn't even take aim or weigh the moves. He just casually threw 2 bricks, and they flew out horizontally, hitting the faces of the 2 thugs in the front in the blink of an eye, and they were hit head on, with blood all over their faces. Fuck. Seeing their 2 companions fall, the 2 thugs behind finally reacted, but before they could make a move, 2 more bricks flew over, hitting their noses. Did you see it? Did you see it clearly? GLUO patted the dust off his hands, squatted down, and looked at the fat boy calmly. The kid who had just tried to be tough was finally scared. The scene was indeed scary. 4 bricks were thrown out, and the faces of the 4 people were covered with blood. They fell straight to the ground and had fainted. See it clearly. The little fat boy nodded obediently, as obedient as a quail, and agreed to whatever GLUO said. In the future, if I find out from Lu Yuan that you bully others, GLUO snorted like a villain, picked up a brick, and broke it into 2 pieces. Do you understand? I understand. Chapter 305, Equivalent Exchange. What about you guys? GLUO was a bit like a bully threatening the children. Facing the terrifying GLUO, these children immediately nodded frantically, expressing their firm stance. Got it. Okay, go ahead, go home and have dinner. GLUO was actually just trying to scare the children, and he didn't really intend to do anything to them, but GLUO thought that this lesson would be something they would remember for a long time. Lu Yuan, I have fulfilled our agreement. GLUO waved his hand to call the little boy over and touched his head. Lu Yuan nodded seriously, looking like a little adult. In the future, the fat boy shouldn't dare to bully you. If he makes trouble again, tell me. Yeah. Go back to school. When you see the teacher, remember to explain to her, and don't let others worry. I know. Lu Yuan looked up, looked at GLUO's eyes, blinked, and looked like he wanted to cry. You are the hero of the future. Stop crying. You can come to see me anytime in the future. Bye. GLUO waved his hand, and the little boy waved his arm, and trotted towards the school. Before entering the school gate, he turned his head to look at GLUO again, waved his arm again, and then left completely. GLUO smiled and watched Lu Yuan leave. When he could no longer see him, the smile on GLUO's face suddenly disappeared, and his eyes were a little cold. Kao Nuan, right? Tell me your story. Okay. Kao Nuan's arm still hurt badly, but looking at GLUO at this time, she was so scared that she could only endure the pain and tell GLUO a story. It has to be said that reality is always more magical than fiction. Novels must pay attention to reason, but reality does not. Kao Nuan used to be a very ordinary family. Although her father and mother were divorced, her father treated her very well, and her life was very ordinary. But one day, when Kao Nuan was distributing flyers with her classmates, she met a man named Yan Yunayang, who seemed to be a gang leader. Anyway, at that time, the man said that she looked like her first love, so he pursued her, and it had risen to the level of entanglement or harassment. Later, Kao Nuan called the police, and it seemed to have worked. Yan Yunayang disappeared for a while. But, not long after, Kao Nuan found that her father was not right. He not only quit his job, but also started drinking. He was in contact with a heavily made up woman every day, and they looked very intimate. Kao Nuan didn't care if her father found another good man, but that woman was obviously wrong. She tried to persuade her father, but ended up quarreling with her father. Later, the situation got worse and worse. Without Kao Nuan's knowledge, her father actually started gambling. Moreover, although her father only had one house in his name, someone lent him millions, as if he was not afraid that he could not pay it back. Then, the nightmare came. Using this method to pursue girls? It's too tasteless. GLUO felt that he was a very indifferent person. In this world, tragedies happen every moment, and he can't control it, and he has no interest in it. What happened to Kao Nuan's father is actually not uncommon. Divorced from his wife, unhappy at work, hooked up with someone, quickly joined the game, and finally lost everything because of gambling. But, the starting point of all this should be for money, not to force a girl to submit. Very tasteless, disgusting, and very disgusting. That's right, it's not the evil that is disgusting, but the way he chose that is disgusting. Yan Yunayang. Yan Yunayang. What's wrong with this world? How can heroes fight for humans who are so disgusting? I'm very unhappy. GLUO was actually in a good mood today. He punished a group of elementary school students and fully experienced the joy of educating people. But at this time, his mood was very bad. Very bad. Very unhappy. Kao Nuan, I can solve this matter for you, but I can't be a hero in vain. From today on, you have to work for me. GLUO now feels that he is narrow-minded, completely unlike the past, when he was chivalrous and brave, and took action when he saw injustice. Now that he has done a good thing, he actually wants revenge. What? Working? Kao Nuan covered her arm, not understanding what GLUO meant. GLUO looked about the same age as her, just a senior high school student. Why was he so arrogant? Kao Nuan, how are you studying? Very good. How old are you? Ranked, 0.30th in the grade? Can you get into a top university? No big problem. What subjects are you good at? Mathematics. Mathematics? Okay, people who are good at science should have good thinking ability. GLUO nodded seriously, as if Kyo Nuan had become his employee. Kyo Nuan, I will help you settle this debt, but in exchange, you have to work for me, and I won't let you suffer any loss. 10 years is enough. 10 years. Kyo Nuan was only 18 years old this year, and it was difficult for her to describe her vision for 10 years later. At this time, GLUO suddenly said this, and she was a little confused. Yes, work for me for 10 years, and the position is just an assistant. The salary will be based on the minimum wage standard, food and accommodation are provided, no holidays, and you are on duty 24 hours a day. How about it? As soon as GLUO opened his mouth, he was an old capitalist. This description was not an assistant at all, but a social animal. Kyo Nuan was scared when she heard it, let alone agreed. The salary is the lowest standard in society, and the working hours are 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and 365 days a year. My goodness, are you treating people like machines? This is too. Kyo Nuan is just a senior high school student. How can she understand the problem of work? But GLUO looked at her calmly, as if he was talking about blessings. Kyo Nuan, you have to understand that your family is now burdened with millions of debts. I will help you to get rid of the debt. There is a gangster boss harassing you. I will help you. You work for me. Food and accommodation are provided. You don't need to spend much money. The minimum wage is enough. And for a full 10 years, you don't have to worry about being laid off. As my assistant, you can also learn a lot of things. Isn't that good? GLUO didn't actually plan to do this at first, but now, GLUO talked more and more. He felt that this was a good choice. Sukinghan is still sleeping now. He may not be able to accompany her all the time, and having someone to trust as a nanny is indeed a good idea. Kyo Nuan, I hope you don't think too much. My girlfriend is 10 million times more beautiful than you. I have no interest in you. I just think you are a promising talent. I hope to help you. Kyo Nuan was stunned by GLUO's theory. She stared at GLUO, and for a while she didn't even feel the pain in her arm. Oh my god, are there such shameless people who take advantage of the fire in this world? Capitalists, yes, and there are many. Chapter 306, It's All Blessings. Kyo Nuan certainly didn't want to agree to GLUO's conditions. After hearing GLUO's outrageous conditions, her first thought was to refuse. However, just when Kyo Nuan was about to open her mouth to give an answer, GLUO quietly moved his feet and stepped on the finger of the gangster next to him. The gangster in a coma woke up because of the pain. He screamed, and before he could react, GLUO stepped on his chest and couldn't move. Kyo Nuan, your father is still in our brother Yan's hands. You can't run away. Your reputation is over. Don't think you can escape. Noisy. GLUO originally just wanted him to say a few harsh words, but he didn't expect this man to speak so harshly. GLUO kicked him on the chin with his toes, which directly shut the man up and made him confused. Kyo Nuan, I think you should try to trust me. I'm quite reliable. Can your situation get any worse? GLUO looked like he was thinking for her, as if his conditions just now were all the blessings he prepared for Kyo Nuan. The girl hesitated for a moment, looked up at GLUO, and tears flashed in her eyes. You haven't told me yet. What is your family name? My name is GLUO, G of Jian, LUO of Luoshu. GLUO, I can agree to your conditions, but you have to solve these problems for me first. Kyo Nuan was not a fool, so she naturally would not really believe GLUO's promise, so she did not sign any contract with GLUO, and simply let him solve the problem first. As for the future, we will talk about it later. Okay. GLUO seemed to not know Kyo Nuan's thoughts and directly agreed to the whole thing. Hey, bastards on the ground, get up. GLUO kicked the 4 people on the ground and woke them up one by one, although the method was a bit brutal. Is your boss Yang Yunayang? Yes. After experiencing GLUO's beating, the 4 people became more honest, especially the leader, who was obviously respectful. Very good. It's good that he is an acquaintance. GLUO clapped his hands in satisfaction and seemed really happy, but his eyes were more sinister and scary. Now, you go back immediately and meet Yang Yunayang in person and tell him everything that happened here. Then, tell him that my name is GLUO. Let him take all the people he can bring, want to bring, and can bring, and gather at the entrance of the training camp. I'll be waiting for you. GLUO's voice was a little strange. He pulled the collar of a gangster and looked into his eyes as if he wanted to imprint his anger in his mind. Remember, tell Yang Yunayang that I will only give him one chance. If he doesn't cherish it, then he doesn't need to live. Okay. The gangster was obviously scared silly by GLUO. In his sight, GLUO was also a nose and two eyes, but he was trembling with fear when he was stared at by GLUO. Go ahead, don't try to escape, you can't escape. GLUO loosened his collar and took a step back. The gangsters looked at each other, said goodbye to GLUO gratefully, turned around and started running. Kao Nguyen really couldn't understand what GLUO wanted to do now. If he wanted to fight directly, why did he meet at the entrance of the training camp? Was GLUO bluffing and doing it for her to see? Let's go, don't stand there, find a hospital, and put a plaster cast on your arm. GLUO raised his hand and knocked on Kao Nguyen's forehead. The girl was really short, and with her sweet appearance, she looked 4 or 5 years younger. See how you end up. Kao Nguyen muttered quietly, but still followed GLUO's footsteps. GLUO walked in front, waved to stop a taxi, and then sat in the front, without explaining anything to Kao Nguyen. The reason why GLUO chose the entrance of the training camp as the battlefield was certainly not because he was afraid of Yang Yunayang, or because he had other thoughts. Instead, GLUO wanted to solve this matter thoroughly. Kao Nguyen sneaked out during training to avoid the pursuit of the gangsters. It is conceivable that her reputation has become what it is. It is a good word to say that she has been spread around. GLUO, the assistant to the president of the crisis response group, certainly cannot carry this reputation, so GLUO must solve the whole thing uprightly. Not only must he wash Kao Nguyen's reputation, but he must also let everyone know that she is a backer. If GLUO does not tell Kao Nguyen about these things, Kao Nguyen will never remember them in her life. Amid the girl's complaints, GLUO took her to the hospital and spent 2 hours to get everything done. Her finally out. Kao Nguyen's right arm has been cast, and a bandage is hung around her neck, hanging her arm. Are you tired now? Cheer up, there is still a big show later. GLUO still looked leisurely, and there was no sign of any big scene at all. Kao Nguyen followed him with her arm hanging, and quietly got into the taxi. Compared to the heartless GLUO, Kao Nguyen obviously has a lot more thoughts. The girl looked out the window all the way until the car stopped at the entrance of the training camp, and she didn't come back to her senses. Get off the car, don't look so worried. If the sky falls, there are tall people to hold it up. GLUO snapped his fingers in Kao Nguyen's ear, scaring the girl. Kao Nguyen turned around and looked at GLUO, and he stretched out his hand to flick her forehead. Ah, it hurts. If it hurts, don't be silly. I promise to solve everything for you. It's not a dream. GLUO walked in front carelessly, and Kao Nguyen followed behind GLUO helplessly. She felt that she had trusted the wrong person and the situation was not good. Oh, it's 5 o'clock. Yang Yunayang hasn't come yet. GLUO took out his mobile phone and looked at the time. He didn't worry about being stood up at all. He walked in front leisurely, and his eyes inexplicably turned to a car carrying watermelons. It is only March now, which is not the season for watermelons to be on the market. However, there are still watermelons in the greenhouses, but they are very expensive, and out of season fruits are not very delicious. This truck is full of watermelons. It is obvious that the truck is not selling watermelons, but a supplier that delivers watermelons to fruit stores. Kao Nguyen, do you like watermelons? Ah, it's okay. Kao Nguyen was feeling uneasy. She didn't expect GLUO to suddenly say such a thing. She wanted to ask GLUO why he asked this, but she turned her head. My goodness, GLUO actually walked straight to the vehicle carrying the watermelons and bargained with them. He actually went to buy watermelons. Brother, how much is this truckload of watermelons? What? 5 yuan per catty? Brother, do you think I don't know the market price? Watermelons are only this price in winter. Now it's spring, they should be cheaper. Chapter 307, a cart of watermelons. Brother, if you sell me this whole truckload of watermelons, and then you can get another truckload, won't that make you double the money? Don't be greedy, you will definitely make more. Gluo put his elbow on the car frame and chatted with the driver who was selling watermelons. The man had no intention of selling to Gluo, but he was actually persuaded by Gluo as they chatted. Brother, are you sure you want the whole truckload? Yes, I want all of them, but it's agreed that you have to wait with me at the school gate for a while, and my customer will come later. Gluo inexplicably said a customer, and Kairo Nguyen was confused by what he heard. Instead, it was the driver who was selling watermelons who thought Gluo had some channels to sell the whole truckload of watermelons. Okay, if you want all of them, I'll give you a discount. Okay. From Gluo's expression, it seemed that he didn't really want to get a discount, but just talked about the price so as not to be treated as a fool. Of course, Gluo's concerns were right, because in Kairo Nguyen's mind, Gluo was probably a fool. A whole truck of watermelons. Gluo didn't even bother to weigh them. He paid the 5-digit amount directly, which surprised the driver. Kairo Nguyen had no idea what Gluo wanted to do, and Gluo's behavior was even more confusing. Gluo asked the driver to drive the car not far from the school gate, unloaded most of the watermelons on the ground, and then asked the store next to him for a piece of paper, wrote a few words on it with a pen, and then put it in front of the stall. Reward: those who smash the watermelon with their heads can take the smashed watermelon away for free, only one per person. Seeing the sign written by Gluo, not to mention Kairo Nguyen, even the driver was stunned. He even opened his mobile phone to confirm whether the money Gluo gave had arrived. It was indeed arrived. Gluo did not lie to him. He received the money. The watermelon was Gluo's. He could play with it as he pleased. He had no right to interfere. It was just extravagant. Isn't this just throwing money for fun? Gluo, what are you trying to do? Kairo Nguyen was amused by Gluo's confusing behavior. Who knew that Gluo ignored her and just bought 3 stools from a small supermarket. He sat on them leisurely, holding a watermelon knife, and began to carve patterns on the watermelon. Does your school have an hour break before the evening self-study? Yes. Kairo Nguyen looked at Gluo in confusion, not knowing what he wanted to do, but Gluo looked calm, as if everything had been arranged in advance. Little brother, is what you wrote on the sign true? No matter where, there is no shortage of brave people. Not long after the sign was put up, someone came to ask. Gluo nodded and shook his head. What is written on the sign is true, but it starts at more than 6 o'clock, and now we have to wait for half an hour. Gluo gave Kairo Nguyen a look, indicating that she should talk about such things in the future, and don't let him speak, it's troublesome. Kairo Nguyen was so angry at Gluo that her arm hurt. Her right hand fell on her neck. She felt that her head was a little bit off. But she didn't go against Gluo's wishes and began to answer the people who came to ask. There were really many people who liked to take advantage. In half an hour, 30 or 40 people came to ask. Some of them thought Gluo was a liar and left directly. Some people waited by the side, waiting for the time to come to see what Gluo would say. At 6 o'clock, the students began to rest before the evening self-study. Because the food in the school cafeteria was not delicious, many people walked out, and Gluo's watermelon stall, which attracted people, also made the students very curious. Huh, look, isn't that Kairo Nguyen? Isn't she following a gangster? Why is she selling watermelons at the school gate? Yeah, I saw a few gangsters looking for her this morning. She used to be a good student, but she has fallen. Now it's over. By the way, who is the guy next to her? Is he a junior? He's kind of handsome. Look at the way he holds the machete. It feels very mysterious and beautiful. I'm afraid he's a master. The students chatted in groups of 3 or 5. Although they were very curious about Gluo and Kairo Nguyen, they didn't dare to get too close. This was a good thing. At least the crowd was not so crowded, but a big circle. Kairo Nguyen's popularity far exceeded Gluo's imagination. In just a short while, there were obviously more and more voices discussing her around, and the eyes were pointing at her. Kairo Nguyen sat next to Gluo with red cheeks, wishing she could find a crack in the ground to crawl into. Finally, a boy who might have a crush on Kairo Nguyen came over. He might want to chat with Kyo-Nuan, or he might want to ease her embarrassment. Anyway, he came over like a brave man. "Excuse me, is what's written on the sign true?" "It's true, but you have to wait." "No need to wait, you can do it now." Gluo interrupted Kyo-Nuan and made a gesture of invitation. The boy didn't expect Gluo to be so decisive. He was stunned for a moment, picked a small watermelon, held it awkwardly, and hit the watermelon with his head. Bang. Because the boy didn't use much force, the watermelon didn't break. He wanted to put the watermelon down awkwardly, but he didn't expect Gluo to give him a gesture to try again. "I didn't say it can only be done once, you can try again." "Oh, okay." The boy nodded blankly. This time, he put in enough force and smashed the watermelon with a snap. "You succeeded, you can take the watermelon away." Gluo extended his hand and made a gesture of invitation. The boy held the watermelon and wanted to chat with Kyo-Nuan, but Gluo's eyes looked at him, which made him lose the courage to stay, and left with the watermelon. "Has it started?" "I'll do it. I'll do it." Seeing that Gluo really gave the watermelon, the people around him came over, but Gluo slapped the watermelon next to him and broke the huge watermelon into pieces. "Scatter. Don't block the way. Only one person at a time. I'll designate." Gluo's voice was not very loud, but it was very deterrent. A bunch of people around him scattered and turned into the same state as before. Gluo casually pointed to a person and asked him to come over and try. The result was obvious. The man tried twice and the watermelon was still broken. Hitting the watermelon with your head is actually a matter of recklessness. As long as you are determined, anyone can do it. This act of giving away watermelons for free has aroused interest among the people around, and the students who were out also gathered around curiously. Gluo's selection was also very targeted, usually one passerby and one student. Although the student pointed at the girl, he also allowed her to let someone else take her place. As time passed, more and more students gathered around, and the watermelons in the cart became less and less in Gluo's random gifting behavior. Chapter 308, Big Watermelon. During the whole free watermelon giveaway event, Gluo was actually a hands-off boss. He sat on a stool, holding a watermelon carved into a lantern, and slowly designated the next one. Kyo-Nuan sat next to Gluo, a mascot who didn't need to talk, but just had to pose awkwardly. The last driver was responsible for handing out watermelons. Since it wasn't his, he didn't feel bad, but felt a little happy. The people around who got things for free were of course happy. Many of them left because they didn't get to choose one. Many students gathered around because Gluo kept pointing at the students. As long as they waited a little, there was a high probability that they would get a watermelon for free. Of course, it was impossible for no one to be unhappy with such a happy scene. The person who had been watching for a long time finally chose to enter the venue. He was a dark-skinned strong man with thick knuckles on his fingers. He had obviously practiced external martial arts, and might even have dabbled in Muay Thai. He had a knife on his waist, and walked into the venue. "Hey, I want to try it too." The sturdy man pushed the person Gluo had just pointed out away, as if he was going to cut in line. Gluo looked up at him and nodded gently. "Driver, give me a watermelon." Okay, the driver who was selling watermelons didn't expect that someone would challenge Gluo's watermelon delivery. Seeing that this person had a fierce face, it was obviously not a good person. Gluo was afraid that he would be in trouble. The driver deliberately picked a large and thick-skinned watermelon, wanting to make this person lose face, but what he didn't expect was that Gluo suddenly stretched out his hand to him and gestured to hand the watermelon to him. "Here you go." The big watermelon held in the driver's hands was the king of the watermelons in the car, weighing at least 20 kilograms. He originally wanted to let Gluo take it with both hands, but who knew that Gluo held it steadily with one hand, just like holding a ball. "Give it to me." The sturdy man stepped forward and wanted to take the watermelon from Gluo's hand without hesitation, but what he didn't expect was that Gluo held the watermelon knife in his right hand and put the watermelon on the ground in front of him with his left hand. "You, knock here." Gluo's tone was full of unquestionable. He sat on a stool with indifference in his eyes. The watermelon was placed on the ground not far from his feet. If the strong man wanted to knock the watermelon with his head, he couldn't even bend down. He had to squat, or even kneel, to knock the watermelon with his forehead, and this posture was just like kowtowing to GLUO again. You are looking for death. The strong man was instantly angered by GLUO's attitude. He took 2 steps forward and wanted to kick the watermelon to pieces. In his estimation, although GLUO was holding a watermelon knife, it was difficult for him to get up because of his sitting posture. Secondly, there was still a little distance, so he should be able to react. However, what everyone didn't expect was that when the strong man kicked forward, he suddenly propped up his body and stabbed the blade in his hand forward. Puff. The watermelon knife stabbed straight forward, like a horizontal cold light, directly pierced the strong man's calf. Because he used a lot of strength, the blade also tore a large piece of flesh and blood from his leg. The scene was extremely horrifying. "Fuck you." The sturdy man screamed. Not only did he not retreat, but he stretched out his hand to grab GLUO, and GLUO did not retreat either. He stretched out his left hand and grabbed his arm and twisted it suddenly. With a click, the sturdy man's right arm was instantly twisted into a knot. Then GLUO fell to the ground, and the man's head hit the ground like a bowling ball. "Shut up." GLUO grabbed the sturdy man's hair with his right hand and pulled him in front of the stool. Then GLUO sat on the stool, picked up the watermelon with his right hand, and smashed it directly into the sturdy man's face. The thick-skinned watermelon weighing more than 20 kilograms instantly broke the sturdy man's nose bridge, and the watermelon exploded in the middle, and the red flesh splashed everywhere. With the red blood plasma flowing down, the scene was like a horror movie. "Don't you want to eat? Eat it." GLUO pressed the strong man's hair with his left hand, like an iron nail. No matter how he struggled, his head would not move at all. The strong man's right arm was broken. He tried to stop GLUO with his left hand, but GLUO directly twisted off a finger. Then, GLUO picked up the broken melon pulp on the ground and began to stuff it into the strong man's mouth, regardless of whether he could eat it or not. He just kept stuffing it. If he didn't eat, he couldn't even breathe. Woo 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 woo. The strong man, who was nearly 2 meters tall and looked like an iron tower, was pressed to the ground by the gentle GLUO, who kept stuffing watermelon into his mouth. He struggled, shouted, and sobbed, but no matter what he did, it didn't affect GLUO. GLUO just looked indifferent and did his job. From delivering watermelons to bloody stuffing of watermelons, it only took a dozen seconds. Because it was too fast and abrupt, many people didn't even react. Until now, someone's scream was heard. GLUO. He will die like this. Karo knew and never expected that GLUO would have such a cruel side. GLUO's expression was extremely indifferent, as if he was not killing people, but killing a dog. The driver who sold watermelons was also stunned. He took a few steps back, wanting to escape, but not daring to escape. This young man is too scary. He looks delicate and weak. How could he be so cruel? A good man. Now his right leg is pierced, a finger on his left hand is broken, his right hand is twisted into a knot, his face is covered with blood, and his nose is broken. Today, if his boss doesn't come, he will die. GLUO stuffed pieces of watermelon into the strong man's mouth. He could swallow it at first, but now he can't swallow it anymore, and even his strength to struggle has decreased. GLUO. Stop it. When most people were running away, a group of people came against the current. The one walking in front was still GLUO's acquaintance, Yan Yunayang, who had been beaten up by him. Woo, woo. The strong man who was forced to eat watermelon by GLUO heard Yan Yunayang's voice, as if he heard the sound of nature. He whimpered in pain, and another large piece of watermelon was stuffed into his mouth. Facing Yan Yunayang, who walked in quickly, GLUO seemed to be completely unaware. He was still doing the work at hand and punishing Yan Yunayang's vanguard. GLUO. I told you to stop. Yan Yunayang finally couldn't stand GLUO's disregard. He took out a pistol from his pocket, ran forward 2 steps, and pointed it at GLUO's head. Now, stop it. Otherwise I will shoot you. Ha, interesting. GLUO seemed to be frightened by Yan Yunayang and stopped the work at hand. GLUO raised his head and looked at Yan Yunayang, as if he didn't care about the muzzle of the gun in front of his forehead at all. Yan Yunayang, if you use a knife, your boss can still cover you. But if you use a gun, can he withstand it? GLUO had an indifferent expression on his face, like an elephant facing a cat. GLUO even had the mood to tear off a piece of toilet paper next to him and wipe his palms. Chapter 309. News. So what? Before I die, I will kill you and let you be buried with me. Yan Yunayang was afraid when facing GLUO. Even in this situation, he had already pointed a gun at GLUO's head, but he was still afraid. Because GLUO was too indifferent, so indifferent that he seemed to ignore the deadly threat in his hand. Yan Yunayang, you know what you did. Those who can see this kind of thing can't control it, and most people who can control it can't see it. So, you are unscrupulous and lawless. But I want to tell you that, if you are seen, you will have the despair of being chopped down. GLUO wiped his hands with a tissue and looked at Yan Yunayang with a cold look. Yan Yunayang was so scared that his fingers trembled and almost fired directly. You are looking for death. You are the one who is looking for death. You are finished if you do this kind of thing in front of the school gate. GLUO spread his palms as if to express his innocence, but at this moment Yan Yunayang understood what GLUO meant. Before, what he did was not innocent, but the power behind him covered it up for him. But now, if he does this kind of thing, he will die. Because GLUO is here. GLUO is in front of him. Fuck you. Yan Yunayang wanted to pull the trigger excitedly, but at that moment, GLUO grabbed his elbow at a speed he could not imagine, and twisted his wrist before he pulled the trigger. At the gate of the Key Middle School in Changlin City, leading social idlers, holding a bunch of controlled knives, intending to attack students, and even hiding guns, threatening social security. You are looking for death. GLUO took the pistol and kicked Yan Yunayang down with one foot, pointing the black hole of the gun at his mouth. You know, I hate others pointing guns at me. GLUO stuffed the muzzle of the gun directly into Yan Yunayang's mouth. As long as he pulled the trigger, Yan Yunayang's head would instantly have a big hole, and he couldn't die anymore. On the other side, Yan Yunayang's brothers did not expect the situation to turn around so quickly. They stood not far away, not daring to move forward or backward, feeling extremely embarrassed. Don't move. Don't move at all. Just like in all TV dramas, the righteous partners arrived late, but what was different from the past was that this time, the armed police who arrived were armed with live ammunition. They all had loaded rifles, and anyone who dared to resist would be shot on the spot without complaint. The hooligans who had always been fearless instantly lay down, all squatting on the ground, and were arrested obediently. Yan Yunayang, look, I won. Spend the rest of your life in prison. GLUO took the pistol from Yan Yunayang, turned off the safety, and threw it on him casually. Yan Yunayang was startled by GLUO's action. He reflexively wanted to pick up the pistol, but not far away. The armed police who had been staring at this place had already aimed their guns at him. If he dared to hold the gun, he would be shot directly. GLUO, thank you for your hard work. You helped us find the answer again. As the head of the security department, Duan Xiangwen actually came with the armed police. He walked up to GLUO with great enthusiasm and praised him as soon as he met him. We are all serving the people. Thank you for your hard work, Director Duan. You have eliminated harm for the people. Oh, I have already said that you can just call me Duan Xiangwen. You go take care of your friend. I will take care of the record. Duan Xiangwen pointed to Kao Nguyen on the other side, gave GLUO a look that you know what I mean, and turned to arrange the arrest. GLUO walked up to Kao Nguyen. The girl looked at GLUO in surprise. She was relieved and excited, but also a little confused about the future. Kao Nguyen, I have fulfilled my promise. From now on, you will be my assistant. GLUO showed a very profiteer expression on his face. Kao Nguyen pursed his lips, looked at GLUO's face, and finally nodded. Okay. Then, GLUO was just about to give his new employee some chicken soup, but he didn't expect that at this time. GLUO's cell phone suddenly rang. Hello. Kichudi? GLUO, is your place safe? Kichudi called this time, obviously for something important. The girl's voice was very low, and she seemed a little nervous. Wait a minute. GLUO made a wait gesture to Kao Nguyen, then found an empty alley and walked in. Kichudi, go ahead. GLUO, I've been looking for so long, and finally understand why we can't find the secret branch of Zinke Biopharmaceutical Group in Changlin City. Why? Because it's not in Changlin City at all. It just has the name of Changlin City. He playing this word game. GLUO was also amused by Tang Zijian's tricks. His tricks were really despicable. After all this time, everything was a sleight of hand. Mu Yingluo was not in Changlin City at all. Then, where is Mu Yingluo? GLUO, I suspect that Mu Yingluo is not in the country at all. She is on the border of Fanmeng in the north. Fanmeng? GLUO had naturally heard of this country. A few years ago, Fanmeng was still a hostile force, but now, Fanmeng is no longer jumping around. Because Fanmeng is a vast country with a sparse population and serious corruption. The whole country is in a mess. Many cities are like independent kingdoms with their own systems. GLUO, I can't be sure, but today, I got a piece of news. Changken Fixiang has been active on the border of Fanmeng. He has been hiding for 5 or 6 years, and was only discovered today. You mean, Tang Zijian and Changken Fixiang are working together? Who is Changken Fixiang? GLUO had never heard of the name Changken Fixiang. But since Kichudi said this, the whole person must be extraordinary. Changken Fixiang is a madman in biological research. She has been committed to the research of immortality. Because in their country, he did human experiments, and killed many people, so he was sentenced to death. But with the help of some people, he escaped from the trial and disappeared afterwards. Immortality, resurrection, it's really appropriate. GLUO covered his forehead. Now everything was connected. No wonder they couldn't find the so-called Changlin branch, and didn't know the whereabouts of Mu Yingluo. Everything is a deception. Tang Zijian is such a scheming boy. If he hadn't discovered Changken Fixiang and suspected him, GLUO would never have guessed that Mu Yingluo was not in the country. Kichudi, send me a copy of Changken Fixiang's information immediately. I'm leaving for Fanmeng country right now. GLUO knew that Su Qinghan cared about Mu Yingluo the most. Now that Su Qinghan was in a deep sleep, it was necessary for him to go there. GLUO, don't take any trains or planes. My suggestion is, go there quietly. I understand. I will create the illusion that I'm still in Changlin City. GLUO knew what Kichudi meant. As long as he stayed in Changlin City, anything that happened in Fanmeng country would have nothing to do with him. It was the perfect security guarantee. GLUO, remember, keep it secret, and don't contact anyone in the country. Understood. Chapter 310, The Border Between Mongolia and Fan. April 28, 3006, 1026. The land of Fanmeng is seriously desertified. When the wind blows in the plain, dust tornadoes can be seen with the naked eye. Although the evolvers are human, they are beyond human. However, in essence, the relationship between the two is of the same origin. If you think about it this way, you can't escape the things that are bound to happen to some humans. For example, losing money. GLUO had just entered the border of Fanmeng not long ago, and was still wandering around the villages and towns. As a result, he just wanted to buy some food, but when he reached into his pocket, he found that his wallet was gone. Ha 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 ha. GLUO's face twitched, and he laughed like a barbell. He never thought in his life that he, an evolver, would have his wallet stolen, just after coming to Fanmeng. Haha, very good, very good. GLUO waved his hand to refuse the food that the store owner had packed, and told him that his wallet was lost. Then GLUO turned and left in the store owner's eyes. Fuck, too embarrassing. GLUO carefully recalled everything he had experienced before. His perception was very strong, and his memory was clear and thorough. GLUO walked along the way he came, and soon thought of the abnormal feeling at a certain moment. I really didn't expect that an evolver would steal things. GLUO stood on the side of the road, thinking that at this position, someone bumped into him, and then apologized very respectfully, so that he could not think of anything abnormal. Sure enough, it was her. GLUO pondered for a moment, and basically recalled the appearance of the girl in his mind. The evolver who stole his wallet was a girl a little younger than him. She was not good looking, but very kind. She was carrying a basket of vegetables and bumped into GLUO, as if she was thinking about something. Then, she began to apologize in a panic. GLUO certainly would not pursue anything and let her go. An evolver is a thief, huh? There are not many people in this world who can steal the money of evolvers. She is a habitual thief in the entire border. It is impossible for her to have no reputation. Although GLUO did not have much experience, there were commonalities in the interpersonal relationships in every city, and it was impossible for this evolver who stole money to have no reputation. So, GLUO narrowed his eyes slightly and walked towards the dilapidated area in the village. This is a slum-like place. Most of the houses are dilapidated, and the alleys are crisscrossed, making it easy to get lost. In the alley, the light was a little insufficient, and GLUO frowned. Along the way, he smelled the pungent smell of blood, so he came to take a look. In the complex alleys that extend in all directions, there is a building that is obviously taller than the others. The eaves are longer and drooping. The slanting sunlight makes the shadow more obvious. The scorching air here seems to have been distorted, and the smell of blood is spreading outward here at this time. In the deepest part of the shadow, a little girl with dirty clothes was huddled in the corner. She was holding a little girl of the same age in her arms and crying softly. Because it was too dark, GLUO couldn't see the girl's appearance clearly, but he basically judged that she should be about 11 or 12 years old. The girl in her arms was breathing heavily and seemed to be in pain. Not far from the little girl, two boys who looked about 13 or 14 had fallen in a pool of blood. One of them had his throat cut, the other had his kidney pierced by a knife, and finally a brick smashed half of his cheek. The bodies fell silently to the ground. Judging from their clothes, the two boys were also beggars. They stared at the sky with wide eyes, as if they couldn't believe that they were dead. When GLUO approached, the crying child holding the girl turned his head in fear. She was just 12 years old and was covered in blood. Her clothes were not worn out, but they were very dirty. Her face was also dirty, making it difficult to see her appearance. But the only thing that GLUO remembered was that in the shadows, her eyes looked over and stared at GLUO, and her pupils seemed to be shining. It was an emotion of never giving up. When people reach a dead end, they will kill people. GLUO's expression seemed particularly heavy. He looked at the little girl's vigilant and resolute eyes, and suddenly felt a little sad. Yes, this world, the weak are a kind of sadness. They cannot dominate their own destiny. They can only be imprisoned by the network of society, and look at the beautiful world in the tiny gap. Hello, my name is GLUO. I have a small problem, and need your help. GLUO was the first to break the silence and smiled kindly. The only sober little girl stared at him, but did not move immediately. However, GLUO could see the struggle in her eyes. She was also hesitating and looking forward to it. In her heart, she probably prayed for GLUO's help. Don't get me wrong, I don't have any ill will towards you. I'm a traveler, and you can say that I'm smuggling. The reason I found you is that I want to ask you about someone. She stole my wallet and left me penniless. You see, now you and I are both in trouble. We can make a simple deal. Although there is no guarantee for the deal. But I don't have any ill will towards you. You tell me the whereabouts of that person, and I will help you. GLUO pointed to the girl in the girl's arms, who was in a wrong state, and nodded very affirmatively. I think I can help you too. Really? The girl looked at GLUO in a daze, as if she couldn't believe that GLUO actually helped her, and GLUO nodded heavily to express his kindness. My sister has a high fever. Please, give me some money. I want to take her to the hospital. The girl was about 11 or 12 years old. Because she was really young, her voice was still very immature, but no one knew what she had been through. Her voice seemed weak and hoarse. She looked at GLUO with a desperate begging in her eyes. My lord, I really beg you. I'm willing to pay any price. Please save my sister. She has a high fever, and she hasn't eaten for 2 days. She really can't stand it. Please save her. The little girl seemed to finally understand GLUO's kindness, and felt the hope of life. She put down the girl in her arms, crawled to the edge of the shadow, and knelt in front of GLUO with her knees together. Please, I'm willing to give everything I have. I just hope you can save my sister. I killed these 2 people. They intended to do something bad to my sister when I was looking for food for her. Fortunately, I returned because I was worried, so I had the opportunity to kill them by surprise. If you think I was wrong, I'm willing to repay with my life, but the only thing I ask of you is please save my sister. She is innocent. She is really a good child. She shouldn't die here. The little girl's cry was not loud, but it was filled with unspeakable pain. The sound of her cry was really distressing. She kept kowtowing and begged GLUO. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 311, Overlord seeks medical treatment. Sir, please. As long as I can do it, anything is fine. As long as you can save my sister. Ha. I've already said I need your help. Just treat it as a deal. GLUO looked at the pitiful appearance of the little girl and knew that she had become accustomed to the attitude of being treated as a nobody. Her way of asking was to give up everything just to impress GLUO. Fan Meng's situation has become increasingly corrupt over the years, which is simply sad. At this time, the little girl listened to GLUO's words, but did not get up from the ground. She lowered her head and almost bit her lips to bleed. She didn't dare to bet whether her presumptuous attitude would make the adult in front of her angry. GLUO was her only hope, so there was no way. The little girl could only use such a method of asking for everything to expect GLUO to agree to her conditions. Okay, get up. I agree to your conditions, and the deal is established. GLUO gave the final answer, then held his breath to endure the pungent smell around him, walked to the corner of the shadow, and picked up the little girl with hot breathing. Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. The little girl watched GLUO pick up her sister, feeling both scared and happy. Her sister and her clothes were very dirty, and she was afraid that GLUO would get angry. But at this time, unlike what she imagined, GLUO did not have any disgust, but held her sister carefully. Let's go to the hospital first, and then we'll talk about it later. At this time, GLUO didn't care about his clothes. He picked up the seriously ill girl and motioned for her to lead the way. At this moment, GLUO also knew that he didn't have a penny, but in this case, it was no longer a matter of money, but a living life. By the time he found his wallet, I'm afraid the little girl would have been unable to hold on. Thank you. At this time, the little girl's eyes were already red. She watched GLUO gently hold her sister, and tears fell from her eyes, but she quickly wiped her tears and walked quickly in front to lead the way. What's your name? Sir, my name is Sona, and my sister's name is Sia. Sona. Sia? GLUO looked down at the seriously ill little girl in his arms. Because GLUO was holding her, he could see her more carefully, but at this moment, GLUO suddenly discovered that the girl in his arms and the girl leading the way looked exactly the same. Are you twins? Yes, sir. Sia and I are twins. Oh, by the way, you don't have to call me sir, just call me GLUO, G for Guan and LUO for Luosu. Sir GLUO. Sona only really knew GLUO's name at this time, so her name quickly became a combination of a local rich man. The name thing was not a problem, so let's not talk about it for now. GLUO, led by Sona, crossed 2 blocks and finally arrived at a hospital. Then, GLUO held the frail Sia, kicked open the door of the hospital in the surprised eyes of many passers-by, and rushed in, as if no one was around. Hey, stop. I have a patient here. I need to treat him immediately. GLUO had no money, so he didn't plan to go the normal way. As for mobile payment, Fan Meng was so confused. Do you think mobile payment is possible? GLUO rushed to the hospital, casually found a man who looked like a doctor in the hall, and then walked over quickly. Ah, you. The male doctor stood with his back to GLUO. When he heard his voice, he turned his head. When he saw GLUO holding a dirty beggar and walking towards him with a fierce look on his face, he was already confused as an employee. At this time, GLUO had already walked to the male doctor. He raised his hand and grabbed his neck and pulled him in front of him. Hey, did you hear that? Hurry up, give her emergency treatment. I'm not a doctor. I'm responsible for data management. The male doctor. Oh no. The male employee looked at GLUO's gloomy and terrifying expression, trembling for a while, and explained in fear that he was not a doctor, for fear that GLUO would hit him. If he were a real doctor in the hospital, he would probably be used to patients with all kinds of personalities and various medical requests. However, the male staff member was a complete soy sauce. He hid in the archives room every day and had no contact with patients. At this time, he was scared to death when he met someone with GLUO's attitude. Data management? I don't care about you. Now, I ask you to find a way to get her medical treatment immediately and go to the emergency room immediately. If you can't do it, I will twist your neck immediately. At this time, GLUO showed a very anxious look. He loosened the collar of the male staff member and put Sia in his arms. The emergency room is over there. You have to pay first and then enter the emergency room. Shut up. Human life is at stake. Go and do it. If she doesn't get medical treatment within 10 minutes, I will break your arm. GLUO certainly couldn't say that he had no money at this time and could only use the overlord to see a doctor, but he didn't intend to show it so obviously at this time. He just used an imperative tone to make the male staff think that he was very anxious and didn't mention the money issue for the time being. Okay. When the male staff heard that Sia's arm would be lost if he could not go to the emergency room within 10 minutes, he nodded vigorously, not caring about the money, and rushed to the emergency room with the seriously ill little girl in his arms. Sona, follow him. Call me if you have any questions. GLUO waved his hand, and Sona immediately nodded heavily and quickly followed the male staff. GLUO stood upright in his place, facing the four figures walking quickly. It's time to test the king's medical law. It's time in this era. The chaotic national situation is always accompanied by irritability and fighting, especially in places like hospitals, where possible riots have to be prepared. So the four people who rushed towards GLUO were obviously the hospital's protection personnel. 3 of the 4 big men were tall, and only one was slightly short. They held metal sticks in their hands. Although they had no intention of killing, they were obviously not the kind of people who talk nonsense. Of course, don't talk nonsense. This may also be in line with GLUO's wishes. There were not many people seeking medical treatment around. Seeing the fight, they all took 2 steps back, but no one ran out. It was obvious that a fight was about to break out, but they had no intention of avoiding it. Instead, they all watched the excitement. Who are you? What do you want to do? The first big man who rushed over was obviously the leader. He wanted to ask GLUO, but GLUO obviously didn't intend to talk properly. What I want to do is none of your business. GLUO didn't intend to have a good chat at this time. He didn't have a penny in his pocket. He was at a disadvantage and didn't have the right to talk. But if they fought, whoever had the bigger fist would be the boss. Chapter 312. Get used to it. Don't talk if you can. GLUO pulled up a table beside him with his left hand. The solid wood desk seemed to become a matchstick in his hand. GLUO swung forward, and the whole desk slapped towards the strong man in the front. Don't know whether to live or die. Faced with this situation, the security chief, who was already familiar with it, did not hesitate. He swept the solid iron rod in his hand forward, and the huge kinetic energy hit the flying desk with a bang. With a click, the complete desk broke from the middle. I think so too. At the moment, when the desk collapsed, GLUO's body slid forward. His speed completely exceeded everyone's imagination. The security chief had just smashed the desk and was about to say something, but GLUO had already rushed in front of him, too fast. At this moment, in the surprised eyes of the security chief, GLUO grabbed the iron rod in his hand. The strong man was still planning to wrestle, but GLUO stepped on his toes with his right foot. A muffled sound rang out, and the strong man's eyes widened. I'm afraid that the bones of 2 toes have been cracked. With this force, GLUO pulled the solid iron rod. Then GLUO grabbed the body of the security chief and threw him forward. Bang! The second person who rushed over collided with his head, and then he was hit by a huge force that he couldn't believe. He actually flew out holding his security chief. because GLUO's speed was too fast. It was not until this time that the third person rushed over. At this time, GLUO swung the iron rod in his right hand forward. The unstoppable momentum was so fierce that it was scary. Not to mention that there was a person in front of him. I'm afraid even a wall would be pierced. When the third security guard saw the iron rod swung by GLUO, he gritted his teeth and swung his weapon at GLUO. Bang! The sound of the iron rods colliding was somewhat crisp. The tall man facing GLUO screamed, and the stick in his hand was hit back by GLUO and hit him with a bang. A click could be heard vaguely. Obviously, his left shoulder blade was broken. At this time, all the people who had been watching the show fell completely silent. It's not like they had never seen a fight in a hospital before, but they had never seen a fight like this. The man who worked as a security guard in the hospital was very good at fighting. There were countless medical troublemakers who were half crippled by him, but today, he actually had his weapon taken away and thrown away at the first sight. Do you want to fight again? At this moment, GLUO stood on the opposite side of everyone, holding a solid iron rod in his right hand. There was no fierceness or anger in his eyes, but only contemptuous contempt. Arsehole. The security chief only had a broken toe bone in his left foot, and no other injuries. He had never been so humiliated before, and was actually thrown away by someone. He was actually scared at this time, but due to his duties, he certainly couldn't run away, so he picked up the iron rod of his companion who had just been knocked away by him on the ground, and was about to rush over again. Hoo. But at this moment, GLUO raised his right hand, and threw the iron rod in his right hand. GLUO's strength was so great that the sound of the iron rod breaking the wind was so loud that it was frightening. The head of the security guard also stared at GLUO. He didn't see GLUO's movements clearly, but he heard the sound of the iron rod breaking the wind, so he jumped to the side without hesitation. And it was this action that saved his life. Almost the next second, when he lay down beside, he heard a huge bang, and the iron rod thrown by GLUO actually pierced into the wall vertically and diagonally, piercing nearly half a meter. What? Do you want to fight again? At this point, the security chief would be a fool to say that he still wanted to fight him. He knew that he couldn't beat GLUO, but he didn't expect the gap to be so big. Very good. Since you don't want to fight, I don't want to do it either. But this time, you must give me an explanation why. I went to the hospital, but I was just anxious to ask for emergency treatment, and 4 people rushed over with iron bars and wanted to kill me. Also, the momentum of your attack was murderous. If this iron bar hits me, even if I don't die, I will be half disabled. Today, if you don't give me an explanation, then you will die. GLUO pointed his finger at their faces. His momentum was aggressive, and there was no room for maneuver. GLUO's action was simply an insult to people, but the 4 security guards didn't dare to say another word, because they knew that, if they dared to say anything, GLUO would immediately start to beat them. It was obviously him who threatened the doctor. With such a bad attitude, he kicked the door of the hospital open with his foot, just like he was going to kill someone. How could they not do it? Moreover, he also asked, "Who are you? What do you want to do?" But you said, "If you can do it, don't talk nonsense," which made them do it. How come? It seems that they are wrong. Does it make sense? Haha, it really does. Since your fist is big, it makes sense. The situation in this country has been corrupted, the government has lost its credibility, and the society is turbulent. People who have lived in this situation for a long time have a lot to say, but at this time, even if they are asked to say it, they dare not say it themselves. GLUO's attitude is very clear. If you dare to say one more word, I will kill you. After all, if you can do it, don't talk nonsense. So, the situation at this time is too embarrassing. The 4 security guards really have no words to say, and of course they dare not say it. They also can't estimate GLUO's situation. At first, everyone thinks that he doesn't want to be very strong, but it turns out that he is not only terrifyingly strong, but also terrifyingly fast. Nothing to say? Okay, I'll give you 10 minutes. If you don't have anything to say, then go find someone who can talk and ask your leader to come see me. If you can't find him, you can die. GLUO put down his right hand pointing at them. took a last look at them, and walked towards the emergency room. At this moment, GLUO had a straight face and looked murderous, but in fact, GLUO was trying not to laugh. He was also embarrassed. He was so tragic that he had to do something that only black people could do. Alas, a penny can't kill a hero. Who told him to lose his wallet? Don't blame me, blame the person who stole my wallet. GLUO explained silently in his heart, but on the surface he still looked like I was very angry. You must explain to me, and compensation cannot be less. Isn't this what black people specialize in? They pretend to touch porcelain, and then use their fists to turn the fake into the real, but in short, there is no way. Whoever has a bigger fist is invincible. As GLUO's figure disappeared in the emergency room, the originally silent hall suddenly became chaotic. Chapter 313, Femo. Fuck. It's really amazing. Did you see that? That strength, that speed, invincible. I couldn't see it clearly even with my eyes wide open. What strength and speed? Didn't you notice his judgment? He threw the table and rushed forward. Then the table was broken. As soon as the iron rod was swung away, he rushed over. No fight. Really no fight. To be honest, I have never seen his speed and strength. Is he the son of that martial arts master? He is still young. Really amazing. The onlookers dared to discuss loudly at this time, and 3 of the 4 security guards were beaten, but fortunately they were not seriously injured and no one died. At this time, a man who looked like a leader ran down from upstairs. He looked at the mess in the hall, and was a little confused for a while. After all, he didn't see the figure of GLUO, the instigator of everything. Then, the 4 security guards supported each other and walked over. The leader listened to their stories and nodded gently. In fact, there is nothing much to say. GLUO's attitude at that time was definitely threatening. There was nothing wrong with their attack, but they just couldn't beat him. After listening to the security guard's report, the leader nodded and said that he knew, then asked the security guard to go down and rest, and asked the cleaner to clean the hall. Then he walked towards the emergency room. Isn't it just that you don't want to pay for medical treatment? If you have the ability, you can just say no and waste a table. In this world, everything has its own trajectory and reason. Many things may not be said by everyone, but the meaning they represent does not need everyone to repeat, but stands there naturally. Strength is everything. Of course, you can change it to fists or everything. After all, if you can't beat and don't want to be beaten, you can only surrender. It is for this obvious reason that what GLUO needs is simply completed. Sia has been admitted to a specially prepared ward. Sona has been with her. Her sister has been injected. Now her temperature has dropped and her condition has improved a lot. Because the sister's clothes were a little dirty and Sona was stained with a lot of blood, the director of the hospital asked the nurse to buy new clothes for the 2 girls. GLUO was still very grateful for what the hospital did. He didn't intend to take advantage of the hospital. He just wanted to find his wallet and give them the money. Not for anything else, just for their attitude. After the 2 sisters were stable, GLUO finally had time to consult the thief who was not good looking. After all, a thief who was a sharp-eyed and quick-handed evolver could not be famous. But the result was not satisfactory. After Sia's condition stabilized, GLUO described the woman who stole his wallet to Sona and tried to ask about the whereabouts of the criminal. But the news he got was not optimistic, and as GLUO expected, the person who stole GLUO's wallet was indeed somewhat famous. She was a famous thief in the whole Fan Meng, and she only liked to steal men, which was considered a freak. According to rumors, the woman was an evolver of wind power. She was very fast. Although her combat ability was not strong, she was very good at disguising and hiding. Although she was very good at stealing, it was not that no one noticed her. However, she ran very fast. No one could catch her several times. It was said that she was disgusted by her little traps. After getting the information he wanted, GLUO immediately left the hospital and began to find a way to search for the woman. However, GLUO had just arrived and was penniless. It was not easy to find a local snake or a thief who was good at hiding and protecting himself. It could even be said to be a fantasy. Fortunately, GLUO was not without a solution in this regard. Every city has its own yin and yang. The social circle, where normal people live, is like the line under the sun. Although there will be intrigues, it is just a struggle, and not a vicious incident. But for the people on the other side, they seem to live in the shadows and always avoid the sun. They don't like being ordinary and lonely. They seem to be born to be belligerent and eager to use their fists to determine their status in order to seek greater benefits. They looked at everything under the sun with cold greed, eager to fight and plunder. And they did it. I stagger and fall, like Wade singing out of tune. The man's clothes were not bright, and even looked a little grey, but the expression on his face was very arrogant, and he walked, as if he wished he had 2 more legs, domineering. He had just finished a free meal in a small restaurant, and 2 younger brothers followed behind him. The civilians around him didn't dare to look at him, and they looked particularly scared, and this was what made him most proud. Don't say crazy people have a kind heart. Don't laugh at fools, because fools are hard to find. The out of tune song was low and high. Femo suddenly felt like peeing. He found an alley, and walked 2 steps inside. When the gate was open to release water, the song he was singing turned into humming. Femo squinted his eyes comfortably, thinking about where to get some money next. After releasing the water, Femo shuddered. He always felt that he heard something, but he didn't know if it was an auditory hallucination, because the sound was too light. Femo scratched his ears and still hesitated whether to go inside. Hey, did you 2 hear it? What did you hear? Brother Fei, I didn't hear it. Waste. Femo hesitated for a moment, but still walked in, and as he moved forward, the sound seemed to get louder, and Femo became alert in his heart, fearing that something terrible would jump out. However, as if to prove that Femo's worries were unnecessary, just after they turned an intersection, a tall young man suddenly appeared in their sight. The layout of the houses in the slums is a bit complicated. In order to save land, the alleys here are crisscrossed. The young man happened to be standing at a cross-shaped intersection. His sight was facing forward, but that was already an alley in another direction, which Femo and the other 2 could not see. At this time, the young man lowered his head slightly, standing there with a smile on his face. It was unknown what he was looking at, but Femo could feel that the smile was not friendly at all, but some kind of more threatening emotional expression. Hey, who are you? What are you doing here? At this time, the 2 henchmen beside Femo had already pulled out guns from their pockets, pointing their guns at the young man, and their expressions looked a little nervous. As for Femo, he did not take out his weapon at this time, but was very confused about why the young man was standing there, and he had a feeling in his heart. There must be something he must see in the alley ahead. Chapter 314, Familiarity. At this moment, not to mention Femo, even his 2 followers heard some sounds. The sounds were very light, but there was no doubt that they were faint calls from people. Do you know a man called Femo? Seeing Femo and the other 2 approaching, and even 2 of them looking at him with pistols, the young man was not afraid, but took the initiative to ask a question. Brother Fei. The brainless younger brother next to Femo was already scared at this time. He leaned towards Femo and tried to ask in a low voice what to do, but Femo glared at him hard, so that he didn't finish his words. Stupid. Femo secretly hated his younger brother for not being able to do anything, but more of a hindrance. He was clearly asked by someone, but he still called him Brother Fei. What are you afraid of? We have guns. What's going on? We have to figure it out. This is our territory. Although he was just a small leader, Femo was not afraid at all. He slowed down his pace and deliberately let the 2 followers approach the young man first. At this time, the young man took 2 steps back and deliberately opened the entrance of the alley, so that they could see what was inside, as if he was showing them something. When Femo and the other 2 walked to the entrance of the alley, they turned their heads and looked at the scene in the alley in front of the young man, and their expressions instantly turned into horror. In this alley, that was not considered dark, more than 20 people fell to the ground in a mess. Each of them had their limbs broken, some had their arms and thighs twisted into a twist, and everyone's mouth had been blocked. Even screaming became a hum. Various types of pistols were thrown on the ground casually, and some people had gunshot wounds on their bodies, but it was obvious at a glance that they were accidental injuries. The location of the wounds showed that they were used as shields by others. Not only did they not hurt the enemy, but they also shot their own people. Fenny-mo, do you know them? Yes, I know them, sir. Fenny-mo, will never forget your great kindness. Fenny-mo was almost the first to react. He snatched the pistols of his 2 men, threw them on the ground, and knelt on the ground with a plop. My benefactor. Thank you so much. If you have anything to ask, Fenny-mo, will do it for you at all costs. These people have always been my enemies. Their territory is adjacent to my northern area. This time he came here to kill me. Thank you, my benefactor. See, sometimes, it is really the man who knows the times who is the hero. Well, Fenny-mo, you guessed right. My name is Gluo, indeed. I saved you. Where the alley extended, Gluo stood in half of the shadow. His face was neither happy nor sad, as if he was indifferent to the tragic situation in front of him. When I was looking for you, they were also looking for you, and unlike me, their attitude was not very good. But, it's just that they think they are very powerful, so that attitude makes me very unhappy. So, I will solve them for you. Gluo looked at Fenny-mo kneeling on the ground, his eyes narrowed slightly, looking like a giant beast staring at food. He did not deliberately threaten, but such a simple few words had already scared Fenny-mo out of his wits. Yes, yes, yes. You are right. It's all my fault. I'm sorry that you have to clean up the trouble I caused. If there is anything, please tell me, Master Evolver, and I will definitely do it. Fenny-mo knelt on the ground, looking like he was so scared that his legs were weak, but he lowered his head, and the expression on his face was not really filled with fear. This world, the huge gap in power, makes the class particularly obvious. Although these people can bully ordinary people, in the eyes of some people called evolvers, they are simply small insects, and they can be crushed to death at will. Therefore, these little termites like flies always have their own ways to avoid disasters and seek blessings, submit to the strong, have no self-esteem, and do not need self-esteem. In this world, is there anything more important than life? Fenny-mo knew that Gluo must have something to seek when he said these words to him, but he didn't dare to refuse. He just hoped that what Gluo asked would not be too much. There were fish under the knife, and it would not be too much for Gluo to slaughter them. Normally, the evolvers would never come to their dirty slums. The high and mighty masters really treat them as flies that eat shit. They are disgusted if they look at them for a second. They can live freely with this image. But at the same time, Fenny-mo also knows very well that they are hated by the evolvers. If they don't perform well when facing the evolvers, they are really dead. You know the evolvers? That's much easier. Actually, I really have something to ask you. Gluo nodded gently and suddenly found that there is still a little benefit in this chaotic country. At least the people who stand out are very self-aware. So, Gluo raised his right hand and swung it forward. The huge physical strength brought strong wind pressure when swinging. The speed of swinging was too fast, causing the wind pressure to explode in an instant. A half blade generated by the airwave flew forward. The 2 followers who were still standing beside Fenny-mo who was kneeling on the ground were instantly hit by the wind pressure. Their bodies flew far away with a bang, and they fainted after shaking on the ground. Don't worry, they are not dead, they just fainted. Now, let's have a good talk. Gluo looked at Fenny-mo's horrified eyes and slowly squatted down. I think you should know that there is a thief who specializes in stealing items from evolvers nearby. She is also an evolver, and her rank is about 2nd black iron rank. She only steals men, not women. Her nickname seems to be Butterfly. So, Mr. Fenny-mo, do you know Butterfly? Gluo carefully observed Fenny-mo's expression. The expression on his face looked very terrified, as if he was worried that he didn't know Butterfly and would be killed by Gluo. Mr. Gluo, I'm just a small gangster leader in the slums. How could I know the evolver? If I knew the evolver, why would I still be bullied here all day long? I would have expanded my gang long ago. Fenny-mo was really crying at this time. It seemed that he really didn't know Butterfly and couldn't answer Gluo's question. No, I think this is where you are smart. Gluo stared at any expression on Fenny-mo's face. He held Fediemo's neck with his right hand, as if he was going to break his cervical vertebrae with force in the next moment, to kill him. I have asked many gangsters like you, and every one of them answered that they didn't know butterflies, just like you. But you are different from them. You are the one who answered most decisively. No, it should be said that you are too decisive. People like you always like to leave some room for maneuver when speaking, and never say death in everything, especially when it comes to life. You always leave room for maneuver, and fight for a glimmer of hope. Chapter 315, Deception. But, you are different from them. You answered too decisively, abandoning the habits that you regard as survival instincts. There is no room for maneuver, no chance to smooth things over. You answered so toughly, making yourself like a hero. Tell me, what is the truth? Gluo looked to be only 18 or 19 years old. This youth made him a synonym for easy to deceive in Fediemo's mind. It was not the first time that Fediemo was asked this question, and it was not the first time that he answered this way, but this flaw was discovered for the first time. Gluo, sir. Fediemo's lips trembled with fear. He tried his best to say something, but Gluo suddenly pinched his throat, preventing him from saying anything else. Fediemo, don't you like to be associated with the evolvers? But your mortal enemy suspects that you are related to the butterfly, but you never use this point, as if you are afraid that your relationship with the butterfly will be exposed. By the way, I want to tell you that the one who knows you best is always your enemy. Today, the reason why your mortal enemy brought people to rush over is to kill you. He has determined that you are related to the butterfly through your behavior. Now, he wants to kill you and replace you in the butterfly. Gluo's expression seemed to be smiling, but it was this smile that made Fediemo feel hairy all over. He had actually seen many evolvers. Some of them were irritable, some were conceited, and some were proud, but no one had ever been as calm as Gluo, looking at these garbage like this. How could you see so clearly without careful observation and looking straight at it? As if he understood Fediemo's thoughts, Gluo slowly let go of his hand. Fediemo gasped for breath and finally spoke. Mr. Gluo, I admit that I know butterfly. But, in fact, our relationship is not that close. Fediemo of course had no way to hide it at this time. He tried to make himself look very honest and let Gluo believe his situation. Mr. Gluo, you know, I'm just a gangster leader in the civilian area. How can the evolver look down on me? In fact, Butterfly and I have not had close contact. She often steals the money and items of the evolvers. Occasionally, she will get bank cards or other worthless and unsellable things. These things cannot be traded and are not suitable to be thrown anywhere. For such things, she will put them in a fixed place for me to pick up, and then I will secretly put them in the bank's lost and found. For example, if you lose your wallet, she will only take the cash. When I go to the fixed place tonight, I should see your wallet and the bank card inside, and then I will secretly put them in the bank, and you can get it back. Fediemo quickly explained his relationship with Butterfly, gesticulating to show his main job, and how little contact with Butterfly this was, and it was impossible to get any useful information. After stealing something, return some of it to the original owner. Gluo looked at Fediemo's sincerity, thinking in his heart how far away from the truth it was. Being stared at by Gluo like this, Fediemo became more nervous, and he wanted to speak several times but couldn't. Okay, stand up and take me to the place you agreed on. Okay. Finally hearing Gluo's reply, Fediemo seemed very excited. He stood up from the ground, not even caring about the dirt on his clothes, and hurriedly wanted to lead the way. Gluo looked at Fediemo coldly, without expressing too much emotion. Mr. Gluo, the place we agreed on is quite remote. In fact, I haven't seen her when I went to pick up things. I usually go to see her every 3 days. If there is something, I will take it away and then let others secretly put it in the bank. Fediemo walked in front, and Gluo lagged behind him a little. This surveillance method made Fediemo feel uncomfortable. At such a close distance, no matter what he wanted to do, Gluo could react. And when he spoke, he always wanted to turn his head to look at Gluo's expression to make sure whether he had said anything wrong. but he couldn't turn his head, so Feniemo was in a dilemma at this time, feeling very uncomfortable, but he didn't dare to ask for anything. In this way, Feniemo took GLUO to more and more remote places. When people around him saw Feniemo, they avoided him from a distance, which saved a lot of trouble. Of course, GLUO was also on guard against him. Although he focused his attention mainly on Feniemo, he had a good grasp of the surroundings. The slum area of Fanmeng is not an old building that needs to be demolished. To be precise, it is an abandoned civilian area. When Fanmeng was first established, urban planning was not the best, and there were relatively few people at that time, so the civilian area was built more crowded. Later, with the development of the city, the increase of manpower and material resources, and the help from all aspects was perfect, so the city was replanned and rebuilt, and these abandoned buildings became the areas where the poor gathered. The city has limited capacity, and the gap between the rich and the poor is wide. The final destination of GLUO and Feniemo is a plain 5-story building among these abandoned buildings. Because this kind of standard building is the same, if Feniemo hadn't brought him here, GLUO would definitely not find this place. Although he found the place, GLUO didn't think he could easily find the butterfly, and Feniemo's mood afterwards made GLUO doubt. Time seemed to have the ability to fade the whole world. The 5-story building looked a little shabby, and the creepers were all over the side, like a green wall hanging down. GLUO and Feniemo walked downstairs. The two did not go in immediately, but Feniemo, who was standing in front of the building, was obviously in a wrong mood. This subtle change in emotion was not a blunt turn, but it started from when he approached the building. As time got closer, the uneasiness on his face became more and more serious. He began to sweat, and the whole person seemed to be experiencing something terrible. Feniemo, what's wrong? GLUO deliberately stood in front of the old building, with no intention of going in. Of course, he noticed Feniemo's abnormality. Before he understood the problem, he didn't intend to casually enter a place he was not familiar with. Mr. GLUO, no, nothing happened. Feniemo seemed to be about to say something, but he hesitated. He definitely understood that something was wrong, but he seemed to have something to hide. At this moment, GLUO would be a fool to enter Ashley. He looked at Feniemo and thought about the possibility of his panic. Boom. But at this moment, a loud noise suddenly came from the top of the old building. GLUO almost reflexively grabbed Feniemo next to him and retreated more than 10 meters. Miss A. Run. Chapter 316. Say, bang. After the loud noise on the roof, a roar sounded. Almost at the same time, a whole row of glass on the roof of the 5th floor shattered. The glass in the sky fell like a glittering blade. Then a figure fell from the roof as if thrown out. The girl's screams broke through the sky. Her body fell in a parabola, and there was no tendency to slow down. Ordinary people. GLUO stood not too far away. He observed the girl's falling movements in midair, and found that she had no buffer at all, and her reaction was completely that of an ordinary person. If she fell directly from the 5th floor like this, even if she didn't die, she would be seriously injured. After a brief hesitation, GLUO finally couldn't bear to let a person fall straight to death like this. His body rushed out from the spot like an arrow from a string, and suddenly jumped up where the girl was about to land, caught her with a snap, and then jumped back to the ground. Ah. Ha. This is a very quiet girl, about 15 years old, with short brown hair hanging down to her ears, and blue eyes full of fear and panic. She was so scared that she had difficulty breathing. GLUO held her and quickly left the place where she fell. At this time, the girl who was rescued by GLUO from the danger of falling to death had not yet reacted from the panic. She was very light, and GLUO was like holding a piece of cotton. He ran back to Feniemo and put her next to Feniemo. Do you know her? No, I don't know. Feniemo also showed an unbelievable expression at this time. He looked at the girl who suddenly fell from the roof, his face full of fear and thought. Obviously, Feniemo didn't know her. At this time, GLUO would be a fool to believe that Feniemo and Butterfly had nothing to do with each other. The relationship between the two was definitely close partners, and it was very likely that the content of the transaction involved huge things. His abnormal expression at this time was obviously that his partner Butterfly did not act according to the agreement and plan. It looks like there might really be some trap in this building. It's definitely not the first time that Feniemo has dealt with someone like Gielluo who found the trace of the butterfly. He can live until now, obviously. All those evolvers he brought here are dead. Hey, young lady, are you okay? At this time, Feniemo obviously didn't mean to speak, and Gielluo didn't plan to ask him anything immediately. Since there might be danger in the building, he certainly wouldn't rush in. The girl who was suddenly thrown down from the roof was more worthy of questioning. Thank you. Thank you. My name is Say Paran. The brown-haired girl had calmed down her breathing at this time. Although she was still afraid, she had already answered Gielluo's question. Say, what are you doing? I'm a maid. I went to the street to buy vegetables today and met an injured girl. I took her to the hospital, and then the girl named Say was wearing a black and white maid outfit. She didn't have the shrewdness of a maid, but looked weak. At this time, she didn't seem to know what was going on. While telling Gielluo what happened, she was also thinking about what happened before. Her head seemed to hurt a little, and she kept rubbing her head with her hands. You were kidnapped. Gielluo smelled a very heavy fragrance from her. This smell was a very quick anesthetic for ordinary people, but the price was extremely high. It was not affordable for ordinary people. Maybe. The maid who looked weak and frail was really a little cute. She rubbed her head and didn't know what happened. In the end, she asked a question. Boom. At this time, there was another loud noise in the small building, and even a fire was lit. It seemed that it had been about 2 minutes since Saperin fell. During this period, no one knew what happened in the building, but no sound could be heard from the outside. However, after this sound, the whole building began to shake. It was as if 2 mice were chasing and running around in a shabby cardboard box. There were roars from time to time in the whole building, as if a preset trap exploded. Gielluo put Say on the grass and his eyes wandered between Fermo and the building. Feniemo didn't seem to know what happened in the building at this time. He hesitated for a moment and wanted to rush in, but Gielluo grabbed him and threw him to the ground. Stay here and don't move if you don't want to die. Gielluo looked at the anxious and excited expression on Feniemo's face, and suddenly an impossible thought flashed through his mind. Could it be that Butterfly's Feniemo's daughter? Gielluo didn't quite believe this possible answer. He looked at Feniemo carefully, thinking back to the girl, who was not very pretty, but very kind at that time, but he couldn't find any similarities between the two. At least from the appearance, the two did not seem to be related, but because of this, Gielluo was more suspicious. The two were directly related. For a ruffian like Feniemo who has been hanging around outside for many years, saving his life is almost instinct and habit. There is obviously danger in the building, but he is still eager to rush over. Is this the behavior habit of people like him? Feniemo, who was thrown to the ground by Gielluo, suddenly woke up at this time. At this time, he suddenly remembered that he was not an evolver. He was so weak that it would be useless, even if he went in. Feniemo, Butterfly is your daughter? No, not really. Hearing Gielluo's guess, Feniemo shook his head reflexively, and his attitude of rejection was particularly fierce, but this made Gielluo more certain of this possibility. Macup? Now think about it, Butterfly's Macup is not light. Gielluo stared at Feniemo, as if to pierce his mind. Feniemo's throat moved at this time, but he didn't dare to say anything. He just turned his head and looked at the building, his expression very anxious. At this time, the noise in the building still rang from time to time. The glass and windows shattered in the firelight that appeared from time to time, and occasionally the sound of eager and strong footsteps could be heard continuously. It seemed that a chase was taking place inside, but the route of the pursued person's escape obviously did not leave the building, which made the sound and movement always within the range of the building. Woo woo woo. The cute maid grabbed the corner of Gielluo's clothes in fear at this time. She seemed to want to turn around and run away immediately, and run as far as possible according to the voice that told her to run fast before, but she was too scared at this time and had no strength to run away. Say I run. Gielluo, who had been caught by the little maid, suddenly remembered the shouting he had heard before. Apparently someone told the cute maid to run away quickly and then threw her down. Then, the chase in the building never stopped, but it was always within the building. Chapter 317. Uncomfortable. Is this buying time? GLUO thought about all the possibilities. Say was kidnapped here. If the two people chasing in the building are Butterfly and the other is the person who came to rescue the maid, assuming that Butterfly is being chased, then she should not run in the building, but should come out to find a way to catch Say. But if the person being chased is the one who rescued Say, although it is understandable to delay time, why would Butterfly chase him? Isn't a target the maid? And the voice shouting Say, run. Although GLUO is not sure, he can hear something, it seems. That is Butterfly's voice. Just when GLUO was thinking about what was going on and how to get his wallet back first and then leave safely, the most violent explosion suddenly occurred in the old building. Then a rumbling sound rang out, and the ground of the entire third floor suddenly collapsed, and smoke rushed out of the window, like smoke from a smoker. After the noise ended, the entire building was quiet for a moment, but this silence was soon broken by an angry male voice. Butterfly, you can't run away. That maid can't run away either. You should know where this is. She's just a weak ordinary person. Even if you delay, how far can she run? You initially accepted our mission to kidnap Say Perrin. Now that you have completed the mission, I will come to take the person away, but you didn't even hand her over to me. I'm really curious, who gave you the courage to violate the contract and deceive us Sheng? Now, I'll give you one last chance. Come out immediately and come with me to capture Say Perrin and make amends. Our deal will still continue. I haven't brought anyone back for so long, and my colleagues will be here soon. By that time, do you still have any chance? Butterfly, come out. Stop. Everything you have done is meaningless. Do you think your secrets have been well kept? Do you think what you hid is really perfect? You use the blind spots of ordinary people to make your whereabouts unpredictable. But your father, the leader of the gang, really thought that others would not investigate further? Don't force me to kill your last relative, Butterfly or Figia. Your mother died early, and you have a sister. Because of the accidental death caused by you. So you, a frail brother, used the identity of your dead sister to create a thief who is impossible to exist. Am I right, Butterfly? The man who made the sound in the old building with the attitude of a strong man did not know that there was someone outside the building. He thought that Say had run away, and only he and Butterfly were left here. In order to complete the plan, he needed to catch Butterfly, so he had to deal with her here at this time. After all, it is difficult to catch up with the speed of an evolver's escape, but how far can an ordinary girl run in such a remote place? However, the situation is not what the man who occupies the position of a strong man thinks. Even if he is so sarcastic and threatens the other party's father's life and uses the most unbearable words to provoke the other party, Butterfly, the thief disguised as a man, has always been well hidden. The whole building had been transformed by Butterfly. The abandoned house had become a maze, and all kinds of troublesome traps were hidden in it, so he had to be careful, but he was also anxious. This time, their black voice mission was more troublesome. In order to complete it, they had to get some key information from Say Perrin, and then let Figia steal it. Now, Figia has entangled him, and Say Perrin may have been running away, and now no one knows where he ran to. In this crisis and confrontation, the whole building became quiet, and outside the old building, 3 people heard words that had completely different meanings to them, and they were also in surprised Butterfly. Figia. At the moment of hearing the inexplicable information, GLUO opened his eyes wide and felt hairy all over. Originally, I thought that I was stolen money by a female thief. Although it was very unpleasant, it was still tolerable. But if a transvestite thief who dressed as a woman stole money, it would not only be angry or disgusting. Fuck. Although that girl who was not very good looking, but very likable, seemed to be a man. GLUO knew about this long ago. He asked those people. Feliemo didn't have many relatives. His wife died early, his daughter also died unexpectedly, and he only had one son who was weak and sickly and needed to stay in bed all day. As a result, in the blink of an eye, this sickly boy turned into a cute girl with a big dick, and she disguised herself very well, so no one noticed. Miss Butterfly is a man. Sei beside Gluo also stood there in a daze. She trembled all over and obviously had the same feeling as Gluo. Was she shocked? Was she disgusted? Maybe both, but not very much, and the situation at the moment did not allow the two people's feelings to continue to ferment. Fei-mo, is that Butterfly your son? Fei-ja? Gluo really didn't believe it at this time. At that time, the girl carrying the basket fell down and fell into his arms. Now thinking of the feeling that there was nothing strange at that time, Gluo just felt itchy all over. Hei-sheng. How could Fei-ja be related to such a person? At this time, Fei-mo obviously didn't care about Gluo and Sei's emotions. He stood there in fear, as if he had gone crazy. It's over. It's over. That stupid kid actually went to cooperate with such a person. Hei-sheng. Who is that person? Looking at Fei-mo's collapsed appearance, Gluo was a little confused. Even though he was about to die just now, Fei-mo seemed to have a bottom line of calmness, but at this time, he seemed to really collapse. Hei-sheng. Could it be that? Compared to Gluo's confused face, Sei, who was originally cute, now had information. What is it? Hei-sheng is an organization that has recently become famous internationally. I heard that. It is very powerful and will do anything to achieve its goals. They seem to like killing people very much. Every time they appear, it is a massacre. Sei told Gluo the information he knew, while recalling other things that might be useful for the current situation. Haha, your son is really in line with international standards. Gluo glanced at the panicked Fei-mo and felt no pity for him. He just thought that he had brought this upon himself. To be honest, when things got to this point, Gluo really wanted to turn around and leave, but now that he was abroad, it was very troublesome to reissue a bank card, and he was in a hurry to use the money, so it would be a pity to just give up. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 318, Need to Pay More. That's right. Lord Gluo. Lord Gluo. I beg you. At this time, Fei-mo heard Gluo's sarcasm, and he suddenly reacted. Although his son had arranged things in the building, he obviously couldn't beat the killer from Black Voice. He himself was just an ordinary person, totally a dead end. The only one who could save his son was Gluo. Hey, I just want to get my money back, but I don't intend to get involved in this. Gluo spread his hands frankly, but he didn't intend to help at all. He was considering whether to stay away first and wait for the killer to kill Fei-mo and his son, and then he would go find his wallet. He was a member of the Black Voice, so he shouldn't look down on the money in his wallet. Even if the money was lost, he probably wouldn't take the bank card. After all, he couldn't use it. Hey, Sei, do you want to go with me first? We'll come back after they settle their accounts. Gluo. Sir Sei, who had just heard Gluo's name from Fei-mo, looked at him nervously and was at a loss for words. Gluo certainly knew what the girl meant, but he just thought it was very interesting. Butterfly was Fei-mo's son, who dressed up as a woman and stole the wallets of male evolvers all day long. He colluded with the Black Voice and accepted the task. Then, this butterfly stole his own wallet on the way to kidnap Sei, left in style, and then successfully kidnapped Sei here. However, when they got here, they should have exchanged money and delivered goods, but for some reason, this butterfly suddenly found his conscience and didn't want to hand Sei over to the murderer, so it's obvious that the dog bites the dog. Or thief who kidnapped others just got into trouble with the murderer, but Butterfly was still humane, throwing Sei out, letting her run first, and delaying the murderer himself. But, you threw an ordinary girl down from the 5th floor. Did you forget something? If it weren't for Gluo, Sei would have been injured, with concussion and fractures. So, this butterfly may not necessarily be for saving people. It may have other purposes. On one side is a murderer, on the other side is a kidnapper who stole her wallet, and there is also a gangster leader who has done countless bad things. Gluo is lucky not to kill them, and he even helped Dream on. Among those present, only GLUO and Sei are victims. This poor little maid is still an ordinary person. She was first deceived and kidnapped by a transvestite dressed as a woman, then frightened by a murderer, and then thrown down from the 5th floor. GLUO was lucky to save her. She is the only innocent one. So GLUO asked Sei at this time if she wanted to leave with him, but this cute maid seemed too kind and was a little at a loss at this time. Before there was no danger, GLUO could still not care, but now it seems to be a big trouble, so GLUO decided not to get involved for the time being, just in case he can get back the small money without fighting. Say I'm only at the 2nd Black Iron rank. I can't do anything. GLUO looked embarrassed. It seems that he didn't want to save people, but he had no choice. Well, okay. Sei Perrin was obviously not really stupid. At this time, she could still distinguish between good and bad people. Since GLUO was leaving, she certainly wouldn't stay here. After all, Fenimo was obviously not a good person. Let's go. GLUO didn't say any extra nonsense and turned around to leave. Sei also raised his steps to follow GLUO, and Fenimo on the other side was so anxious that he almost cried when he saw the situation. Master GLUO, help. Fenimo shouted anxiously, and then he actually fell to the ground and hugged GLUO's legs. Hey Fenimo, do you want to die? GLUO didn't have the slightest pity for people like Fenimo. He didn't know how many evil things he had done, and he deserved to die. Master GLUO, I have money. Please. Save my son. I have money. A lot of money. We have saved all the money my son stole. I'll give you 1 million. Fenimo is indeed an old hand. He hugged GLUO's calf and cried with tears. While pretending to be pitiful, he directly released his ultimate move, money offensive. 1 million. It's a bit too little. 1 million US dollars. At this time, as long as you are not a fool, everyone knows that the current situation is really not worth getting involved. The best way is to leave immediately and wait until everything is over before coming back. However, this perfect plan, when Fenimo hugged GLUO's legs and asked to give money, the poor GLUO suddenly hesitated. 1 million, and it was US dollars. Although this kind of anonymous large amount of money is black money, it may be really needed at some times. Master GLUO, $1 million. Please. As long as you let my son live, I will give you $1 million. When Fenimo found GLUO hesitating, he seemed to see the light. His shouting became more shrill, and he simply started crying. Well, the other party is a murderer, a member of the Black Voice. I, a Black Iron level 2nd evolver, risked my life to save your son, and you only give me this little money? GLUO raised his eyebrows and pretended that he would rather die than pay. In fact, he already had some ideas in his mind. Money was one aspect, but on the other hand, he felt that this Feni jar was still useful. After all, he came here to find Chang and Fixiang, and a local snake was still necessary. I don't have any money either. Fenimo certainly understood what GLUO meant. Although the money he had collected was not much, his son, who was a transvestite, had stolen from many evolvers, so he had quite a lot of money. Forget it, then you can collect the body of your son. GLUO dragged Fenimo away and seemed determined not to do it. Don't. Master GLUO. $1.5 million. $1.5 million. Fenimo was really afraid that GLUO would leave immediately. This was his only life-saving straw, and GLUO really stopped at this time. He looked at Fenimo and never expected that he would directly add half. Boom. That was when Fenijaya felt desperate. The huge explosion was like a gushing sea of fire. Half of the entire building was blown apart, as if a giant hand was slapped down. The broken old building collapsed and fell down. The diffuse smoke and dust exploded, as if the scene of the explosion when the building was demolished. Master GLUO. $2 million. I will give you all the money. Please save my son. In this shocking and tragic situation, Fenimo's crying voice became blurred. The smoke and the vibration buried his voice. If you don't listen carefully, you may not hear it at all. Almost at the same time as the loud noise, GLUO grabbed Feniemo, who was screaming, and Say, whose face was pale, and took them to hide behind the building on the other side to avoid being affected by the collapsed building. Chapter 319, Right and Wrong. Fenijaya, you are courting death. In the chaos of collapse and smoke, an angry voice spread. Immediately after the voice, the air in the diffuse smoke suddenly contracted, and then, a huge source of energy flew out from it. It was like the wind that cut through the fog. The wind source of energy flashed with a green glow. The smoky source of energy formed a huge half-moon shaped empty blade, which flew out from the chaos of collapse, splitting the smoke in two, and blowing it away like a breath on the left and right. And at that moment, a bloody figure rolled over several times in a panic, barely avoiding the source of energy empty blade. But at this time, the smoke was also blown away, and the figure who wanted to escape with the smoke was seen clearly. At this moment, the famous thief named Butterfly was covered in wounds, but the wounds on his body were not big. Although there was blood, it was not fatal. Obviously, the other party held back, because they needed him, so they did not dare to really kill him. However, even so, the cross-dressing man whose real name was Fenijaya was in a very worrying state at this time. Half of his long hair was cut off diagonally, and it was clearly seen that his hair was not a wig, but real long hair. His clothes were torn a lot, and the muscle lines unique to men could be vaguely seen, but because of some special training methods, there were actually not many masculine things left, and even his Adam's apple disappeared, becoming the size of a woman. Although Fenijaya just dodged the attack just now, his injuries had already penetrated deep into his bones. He staggered forward on the ground, and it can be said that he was already rolling and crawling. On the other side, the killer who occupied the position of absolute power stepped down from the ruin step by step. He looked at Fijia's miserable appearance and a happy smile appeared on his face. Butterfly, let me introduce myself formally again. I'm Hiku Duhan from Hisheng. I'm here to make a deal according to the agreement between Hisi and you. Fijia, don't struggle, I admit that your hiding ability is really good. Or 3 blue steel rank evolver actually hid a second black iron rank. And your detection ability, every time you only steal evolvers below second black iron rank, and you have never made a mistake. These are your 2 most powerful points, and also what we, Hisheng, need most for this mission. I have to admit that you are really good. Really good, I like you very much. Now, as long as you fulfill the agreement again, stop resisting, and then capture Sayperin with me, our reward will not be reduced by a penny. The man named Duhan is a young man who looks to be about 27 or 28 years old. Although he is a little dirty, he is not injured. There is a thin blood stain on his face. Obviously, everything Fenijaya arranged was not meaningless. He was almost able to kill Hiku Duhan, but this point was probably an insurmountable gap. It was precisely because of this confidence that Hiku Duhan looked like he had won. He stepped back on the ground and looked at Fenijaya with a smile on his face. Give up. The gap between blue steel level and silver level cannot be made up by your cleverness. In the face of absolute power, all the arrangements you made are meaningless. Ha. Duhan, it's impossible. I will never give up protecting Miss Say. At this time, as if knowing that he could not escape, the seriously injured Fenijaya barely stood there, no longer intending to escape. I used to be frail and sickly, like a useless person, but 5 years ago, it was Miss Say who encouraged me, and that's how I'm today. I didn't know her name at the time, and I tried to look for her for a long time, but I couldn't find her. After so many years, I have a vague idea of what she looks like, but today, when I heard that sentence that impressed me so deeply, I can be sure that I have met my benefactor. I always remember that when she encouraged me, she told me, people always make mistakes, but they should not be stubborn. Wrong things are wrong after all. In fact, I have made a lot of mistakes. I always thought that one day I would turn back, but in the end I couldn't resist the benefits brought by the wrong things. But today, at this time, Fijia suddenly pulled out the 2 daggers from his waist. Although he looked like a girl when he showed a fearless look, bystanders could easily confirm that he was a man. I will pay the price for all the wrong things I have done. Perhaps this price is not enough to make up for my mistakes, but I will have the face to see my deceased mother. Fake wine is harmful to people. Facing Fijia's passionate look, Duhan sneered. He had a long and narrow samurai sword on his waist. He drew the samurai sword out of the scabbard, looked at the blade, and showed a cold smile. It's so, too stupid. I have given you enough chances, but you are still stubborn. Do you think you can give up the deal you made with us, Hisheng? How stupid. At that moment, Duhan pulled the II sword in his hand back, and the blade was held horizontally in his hand. The green source power continuously overflowed from his body. The glowing smoky source power was like a cleansing wind. The blade made a sound at this time, as if humming. With this blow, I will cut you in half. Your upper and lower body will be separated in an instant. Because it is too fast, you may not feel the pain right away, but soon, you will only be left with pain and regret. You will watch your blood gushing out, but you can only lie on the ground, waiting for death. Duhan showed a cruel smile on his face, and tried to shake Fijia's determination with words for the last time, but this time, the transvestite thief seemed calm and indifferent. You are so stubborn. If you do this, then you can only die. Facing Fijia's firm determination, Heiku Duhan finally put away his sarcasm. His eyes became cold, as if replaced by some emotion. He had killed too many people. Today, he was just killing one more person. The II sword, which was filled with wind source power, changed from being held vertically to being tilted on the left side under the twist of his wrist. That was the most basic horizontal slashing gesture of the II sword. A fourth silver level evolver slashed horizontally with all his strength. Not to mention a person, even the load-bearing wall of an entire building would be directly cut open. At this time, Fenijaya was wearing women's clothes, and his hands couldn't even hold his short sword. He slowly closed his eyes and suddenly laughed. He actually hated himself, so much so that he didn't care if he died. He ran around stealing evolvers all day, not for money. He just wanted to die. Wanted to die. Chapter 320. Wrong path. Many years ago, he was just a teenager, weak and sickly, and couldn't do anything well. His father was a gangster who sat around daydreaming and drinking all day. He had no ability, but liked to brag. He was tired of his father, and decided to try to support himself. He was in poor health and couldn't work, so he began to try stealing, and it was out of control. Relying on a certain strange talent, he gradually got used to the pleasure after stealing successfully. He had never been discovered by anyone. He felt that he had a superhuman talent and God made him live with this as the capital. His stealing skills were self-taught and became more and more pure. He never failed. One day, he was tired of the stealing skills that were already superb for ordinary people. He longed for a greater challenge, so he went to steal from the evolver. That day, in a park, he saw an evolver who was drunk. Although he was very confident in himself, he didn't know the magic of the evolver, so he targeted the drunkard and used this low difficulty theft as a test. But he didn't expect that. As soon as he put his hand on the drunkard, the drunken evolver instantly noticed him, looked at him coldly, and then just one move, he beat him seriously. However, the evolver did not kill him in the end, but staggered away. Afterwards, he didn't know how long he was unconscious, but he only knew that when he woke up, it was already midnight. He sat on the ground and coughed up blood. He was very scared and rolled and crawled to go home, but that night, he saw a girl who was 4 or 5 years older than him on a bench in the park. She was wearing a gorgeous maid outfit and looked at the moonlight with a lonely expression. At that time, he didn't know why he couldn't help but lean over, and the girl who was injured looked at him with a smile on her face. Her eyes were gentle and calm. She seemed to understand what happened just by seeing him. She nodded to him, sent him to the hospital, and paid his medical expenses. People always make mistakes, but they should not persist in their mistakes. Wrong things are wrong after all. He will never forget that day. She looked at him, as if she saw the rising sun. Although the light was dim, there was a future worth looking forward to. In the end, she said nothing to him. She got up and left. From that day on, he never saw her again, but his fate was completely changed. There is never a clear boundary between good and evil. After all, he was too young. After awakening the original talent, he could not control himself and embarked on another twisted path. At this moment, Fijier even felt that this was his fate. He failed to live up to say parents' expectations, and now, his retribution has finally come. Maybe, this is what he deserves to die. When his thoughts were immersed in the past, Fenijaya heard the sound of Duhan swinging his knife in the distance. He could almost imagine that the swing of the Source Force empty blade was like the rising of the new moon. He had already exhausted his Source Force and had no way to dodge or resist. He would be cut off by the lazy waste and die in pain, just as Duhan had threatened before. Bang. But, 2 or 3 seconds later, Fenijaya, who was ready to welcome the end of his life, did not feel the pain. Instead, he heard a huge muffled sound. After the muffled sound, the chaotic wind suddenly exploded, like the fragments of a vase. Fenijaya certainly didn't know what happened. Because he felt something was wrong, he slowly opened his eyes. At this moment, the figure that suddenly appeared in front of him made his pupils shrink suddenly. He was a young man who looked to be about 18 or 19 years old. He had a handsome and resolute appearance, which made him very attractive. At this moment, he was facing a murderer from Black Voice, Heriku Duhan, a 4th silver level evolver, but the boy was not nervous at all, but had a happy smile on his face. He stood there casually, with his right fist clenched and stretched forward. However, the posture of the young man at this time only made Fenijaya feel incredible, because, at this time, Heriku Duhan's samurai sword had already slashed to the right side. In other words, a crescent-shaped Source Force empty blade had already flown out, but was broken by the young man's punch. Moreover, his right fist was intact. Who is this? Why is he here? Did Duhan sense him? So he turned the Source Force empty blade that was used to cut himself in half, and swung it at him, but he didn't expect that it would be broken by a punch. At the same time, Heriku Duhan, who was in a strong posture, narrowed his eyes slightly. He looked at the young man who suddenly rushed out from the other side of the building, and rushed to not far in front of him. He held the blade in his hand even tighter. The speed of this young man was very fast, even comparable to his normal state. What was even more terrifying was that his strength was also terrifying. The Source Force empty blade that he tentatively swung was actually smashed by his bare hand punch. What was even more troublesome was that from beginning to end, he did not use the Source Force, but was like a person passing by the playground, seeing a football ball being kicked over, and rolling to his feet, and kicking it back casually, so easy, so carefree. Who are you? Are you going to help him? Duhan stared at Gluo solemnly, thinking in his heart what secrets Gluo had, whether he could hide it like Fenijaya, otherwise the other party would not be able to show such terrible strength and speed. Duhan could be sure that from what he could observe, the boy in front of him was definitely a second Black Iron evolver. He can't even release his source power, but why can his body's speed and strength explode to this extent in an instant? His strength and speed are simply not in line with common sense. His speed is okay, and he still has enough advantages, but Duhan recalled the strength shown by this young man who just broke the source power blade with one punch, and felt a strong sense of crisis in his heart. It was because he felt the threat of this young man that Duhan did not take action immediately, but wanted to find out why this person appeared here. If it was not impossible to solve it easily, he would have killed him with a knife. Hello, Mr. Duhan. My name is Gluo, and I'm a second Black Iron level evolver. In fact, I don't want to help him after all. No one wants to help a transvestite. Gluo, who had just broken the source power blade flying towards him with one punch, looked very leisurely at this time. However, someone offered a price that really tempted me and wanted me to save his life. That's why I'm standing here. Chapter 321. Testing the waters. Gluo frankly told the reason. At the same time, he walked slowly to Fenijaya's side and held out his hand to him with a threatening smile. Mr. Butterfly, I think you still know me. Ah, you are. Fenijaya didn't know what happened at first, but when Gluo walked in front of him and held out his hand, he remembered, not long ago, he had just stolen someone's wallet. Don't be me, do you want to die? Gluo's outstretched palm shook, and his smile looked extremely bad, just like a gangster threatening elementary school students for money. Of course, in fact, Gluo was the victim, but his wallet was stolen, so he ran over pitifully. Oh, okay. Fenijaya of course reacted at this time. He hurriedly rummaged through his pockets and found GLUO's wallet. Then he opened GLUO's wallet, stuffed all the money in his pocket into it, and handed it back to GLUO. Well, not bad, the money is not missing. GLUO looked at the wallet stuffed with money, nodded, and a teachable smile appeared on his face. GLUO's money certainly didn't decrease, and even increased a lot. After Fenijaya stole the wallet, he took out GLUO's money and stuffed money into it. Now, it exceeded a lot. Although you stole my money, I will forgive you with great mercy, because of your sincerity. GLUO nodded seriously, put the wallet full of money into his pocket, then waved to Fenijaya and turned around. Fenijaya, follow your father and say ye and leave quickly. Leave this to me. At this moment, GLUO, who had recovered his property, was like a fully fueled sports car. He looked directly at Duhan, with no fear in his eyes. Remember, don't forget. Prepare the money. GLUO was already standing in front of Fenijaya at this time, as if protecting him and shielding him from the sharp edge of Heiku Duhan. Duhan, who was opposite him, looked at GLUO's attitude and his expression gradually became angry. Are you ignoring me, Mr. GLUO? At this time, Fenijaya obviously didn't understand what was going on, but he could hear the general idea. GLUO saved him because of a large sum of money as a reward. And now the meaning, obviously let him go quickly. Although GLUO was sure that, if he used Crossing Yan's power, he would definitely defeat Duhan, but he was actually unwilling to use that power frequently. After he was promoted to the peak of the second Black Iron rank, the blood of Crossing Yan in his heart gradually showed signs of awakening. GLUO felt the bottleneck, but also felt the opportunity. Now, if GLUO wants to break through to the 3 blue steel rank, he must have a passionate battle. Besides, if GLUO doesn't find an opportunity to fight now, how can he know what level he is at now? So, GLUO didn't really intervene in this matter just for money. If Fenijaya was really a guy full of evil, GLUO would have killed him with one punch. However, GLUO asked Sona, although Butterfly stole things, he didn't do anything evil other than that, and he was not a perverted criminal. Today, after meeting Say, GLUO had a different opinion of Fenijaya. Coupled with his previous passionate words, GLUO really made up his mind to save him. Of course, GLUO also thought of a backup plan. If Fenijaya, whom he saved, was not a good person, then he would kill him and his father with his own hands later. Of course, after getting the money, I will pay the price for all the wrong things I have done. Maybe this price is not enough to make up for the mistakes, but I have the face to see my deceased mother. It was Fenijaya's declaration of abandoning his life that made GLUO really look up to him. So at this time, GLUO did not have any extra nonsense. Although he seemed to be sure to face Duhan, only he knew that he did not have the ability to easily defeat a 4th silver evolver. So at this time, GLUO, who had just pretended to be cool, lowered his voice and informed Fenijaya of the current situation. Fenijaya, Sayee didn't go far. She is behind that building, with your father Fenimo. You should take her and your father away immediately. Don't look back. Oh, okay. Fenijaya listened to GLUO's low-voiced warning and immediately became alert. Although he was a little worried about GLUO and didn't believe that he, a Black Iron Evolver, could stop Duhan. But at this time, Fenijaya could only trust GLUO. He looked at Heiku Duhan standing in the distance with a gloomy face and retreated cautiously. Just when Fenijaya began to retreat, Heiku Duhan, who was reported to be from the organization called Black Voice, raised the IAI sword in his hand with a cold face. Fenijaya, go. At this time, GLUO seemed to feel something. He tore off his coat, clenched his right fist, and the muscles on his arm bulged. GLUO slightly lowered his body and stared at Heiku Duhan opposite him. At this moment, GLUO had clearly sensed the killing intent. Duhan stood there, exuding a breathtaking sense of death. It was unknown how many people he had killed to reach this point. Be careful. Fenijaya heard GLUO's almost yelled go faster, and of course he increased his speed. After limping for a distance, he simply turned around and ran forward without looking back. At the moment, when Fenijaya ran away, Duhan, who was opposite GLUO, rose from the ground and rushed towards Fenijaya like a gust of wind. At this time, GLUO did not rush forward. He stepped forward, raised his right arm at the same time, and pulled it back. The next moment, among countless possibilities and results, GLUO predicted the place where Heiku Duhan was about to arrive, and suddenly punched forward. It was a most standard punch. GLUO's right arm went from curled up to stretched out, and he swung forward with extreme strength. Arsehole. Heiku Duhan faced GLUO's attack, and his mind raced, but he soon discovered that his speed could not directly bypass this attack. He only had two choices: break it or dodge. At this time, Duhan was already filled with anger. He raised the samurai sword in his hand and chopped at GLUO with the IAI sword. However, Duhan had no idea what kind of power GLUO's attack had. Almost in the next second, the silver-white samurai sword was hit by GLUO's fist, and the front end of the blade shattered directly. Duhan obviously didn't expect that his weapon would be shattered by someone's fist at the first encounter, and he was almost killed by GLUO's headshot in a panic. Chapter 322, The Speed of the Wind. However, Duhan is a 4th silver level evolver after all, and he is the wind source power that is best at speed. While running, Duhan threw himself on the ground and rolled on the ground, narrowly avoiding GLUO's attack. Very good, you really pissed me off. At this time, the man named Heiku Duhan stood directly opposite GLUO, with a gloomy look on his face. He stared at GLUO as if he wanted to eat him. Just now, Duhan dodged GLUO's right fist. Almost, just a little bit, GLUO's fist would have smashed his head. Duhan is actually well informed. He has traveled to many places and seen all kinds of evolvers, but he has never heard of or seen GLUO in this situation. Just a simple body showed such a terrifying lethality. Duhan's proud extraordinary weapon was actually shattered directly at the first encounter. Moreover, GLUO's judgment ability was too strange. He was a black iron evolver, so he shouldn't have seen his figure at all. But why did he swing his fist at that moment and hit him right there? At this moment, Duhan was really scared. If he had wanted to get rid of GLUO with speed and go around to catch Fenijaya and Sei, then he only had to kill GLUO head on and do other things. Because he was a murderer and liked to kill lives, Duhan cherished his life even more. He was afraid of death and would never allow anyone to threaten his life. So at this time, Duhan no longer cared about Fenijaya, who was limping away. He was holding a quarter-broken IAI sword and staring at GLUO with an indescribable viciousness. Just a black iron evolver, I don't know what secrets you have. At this time, you must die. Really? Then I'm really on it at this moment. GLUO certainly couldn't retreat or escape. He hammered his heart with his right hand, as if announcing something. Once, GLUO's heart was completely broken. Crossing Yan used her own power to rebuild a heart for GLUO, and her bloodline was sleeping inside. As GLUO was promoted to the peak evolver of the 2nd Black Iron rank, this bloodline was reviving, as if telling GLUO that, if he wanted to be promoted to the 3 Blue Steel rank, he had to adapt to them. And now, GLUO did exactly that. Star purple source power was flowing through his body, and his pupils had turned into vertical pupils at some point. The star-like bright color shone in them, incredibly vast. Bloodline awakening. I need a battle that makes my blood boil. GLUO's voice changed unconsciously. When he spoke, the air around him was vibrating. Crossing Yan's bloodline did not bring an improvement in source power, but GLUO's body became incredibly powerful. Just like the giant dragon that destroyed the world and myths and legends. Fighting, only fighting can make you stronger. Because he deeply understood all this, GLUO slowly calmed down and began to put all his thoughts on Duhan. Behind, Fenijaya, who was running away, could no longer hear his footsteps. He had run far away and might have already joined Fenimo and Sei. He was robbed of his wallet, but he still protected him. What kind of justice is that? GLUO was wearing a white tight t-shirt with a heroic look between his eyebrows. He looked only 18 years old, with an upright youthful demeanor. As long as he was fighting, he would never retreat or be afraid. At this moment, Heiku Duhan, holding a quarter-broken samurai sword in his hand, stepped forward heavily. The science source power rose around him, and Duhan's speed instantly became extremely terrifying. As a silver level evolver, Du-Han's power has indeed entered an inhuman stage. There is no doubt that it is impossible for an ordinary black iron level evolver to defeat a silver level peak wine type evolver. However, GLUO is certainly not an ordinary evolver, and there is no way to simply measure it by rank. But in any case, at this time, Du-Han made a fighting posture, and GLUO was also fully focused. Zing, the sound of the blade swinging was actually somewhat crisp. Du-Han in GLUO's eyes just flashed, as if he disappeared for a moment, and then appeared on the side of GLUO. Although the broken II sword in Du-Han's hand was missing a piece, he still used it very smoothly. Almost at the same time, when he was next to GLUO, the attack appeared. And the knife that Du-Han used when he was fighting seriously seemed to stab out of the air for no reason, and the speed was frightening. GLUO, who had been tense, was lucky to react in time. At this critical moment, GLUO took a step back without hesitation and barely avoided the attack. After all, it was a broken sword. Without a suitable weapon to replace, Du-Han had to continue using the broken sword. His previous attack was a bit determined to win, almost a sneak attack, and it was difficult to defend against. But Du-Han didn't imagine that GLUO was so sharp and dodged without hesitation. Moreover, the II sword was a quarter shorter at this time. Du-Han was used to the original length, and he was a little uncomfortable at this time. It was these two reasons that made Du-Han's original plan to completely kill GLUO with one blow fall through. If Du-Han opened his mouth to debate at this time, he would definitely say, "If my sword was still intact, you would have been dead with this blow." But unfortunately, the winner is the loser, and when you really fight, no one will give you time to talk nonsense. So at the same time, just when Du-Han felt incredible about GLUO's reaction speed, GLUO also took action at the same time. In the gust of wind, GLUO's body rushed forward, and his fist swept directly towards Du-Han, but Du-Han seemed to have expected it. The blade in his hand chopped towards GLUO's neck, forcing GLUO to switch to defense. If he couldn't block this knife, and was chopped on the neck, his head would be gone. The next second, when GLUO's right arm tried to block Du-Han's knife that was slashing towards his neck, Du-Han, who was about to chop him, turned the blade around and flipped the broken sword that had already stabbed out. In the end, the silver-white blade's trick of luring the tiger away from the mountain was successful, and GLUO's left shoulder, which was in the wrong position of defense, was lost and torn open by this sword. It's really thrilling. At the moment of injury, the pain directly stimulated GLUO's nerves. His skin and flesh were cut by the blade, red blood flowed out, and the pain was like a giant mouth gnawing. But at this time, GLUO's thoughts were more excited than ever before, and the fearless power was running through his body, constantly strengthening his body, making the bleeding and hideous wound stop bleeding quickly, and repairing it visibly with the naked eye. Chapter 323, Inhuman Strength. Finally, we are close. GLUO's movements were extremely fast. In the closest range of close combat, fists can be said to be the most powerful weapons. Du-Han had an advantage in speed, but what made him miscalculate was that he was close to GLUO. The broken samurai sword could not cause the most biased scene at this distance, because GLUO was very close, and his offensive did not care about his life, just like a madman. At this moment, GLUO showed an absolutely inhuman recovery ability, and his right fist had the power to crush everything. Du-Han didn't dare to be hit even once. Du-Han fell into the most troublesome situation in his constant dodging. Human movement is always based on forward movement. Whether it is left or right or backward, there is obvious discomfort. At that moment GLUO's right fist swung sideways. Du-Han tilted his head and avoided the fatal blow, but GLUO's fist was terribly flexible, changing his fist into a hand knife. In a hurry, Du-Han finally had to try to intercept with the samurai sword. Ding. The sound was like a sword slashing on bread. The broken samurai sword was cut in an instant, and another piece fell off. Du-Han had noticed GLUO's abnormality a long time ago. He had enough defense against GLUO's right arm, but unfortunately, he still couldn't predict it to this extent. Therefore, after cutting the II sword, the hand knife continued to move forward. Du-Han made all-out efforts to make the beginning. In the end, Gluo's palm opened with the largest deflection arc and still touched Do-han's cheek. Unfortunately, only the fingertips. But this was enough. The source power lingering around Do-han did not cause any interception. The hand knife cut through the glorious and smoky source power and suddenly cut the skin of his right cheek. A 4 cm long wound appeared on Do-han's face. The wound was not deep, but it was not just a cut on the skin. Blood flowed out with the pain. Do-han roared angrily, and the samurai sword in his hand, which had turned into a short sword, suddenly chopped down at Gluo's head. Gluo flipped his right hand and actually grabbed the blade. At this moment, Do-han suddenly discovered the biggest crisis. He was also decisive. He did not hesitate to release the blade, turned around and pulled back to distance himself. Once the distance was pulled, Gluo's disadvantage in agility made it impossible for him to get close to Do-han. What a pity. Gluo looked at Do-han's lingering fear, and his right hand clenched, and one end of the silver-white samurai sword was directly crushed into mud. At this time, Gluo felt that he could adapt to crossing Yan's bloodline. Although it was only a very superficial fit, Gluo's physical attributes had nearly quadrupled. Note that this is not a simple addition and subtraction, but a direct multiplication. The various values of Gluo's peak second black iron rank are on average at the 95th string position, and after quadrupling, it is 380 strings. And 380 strings, this is already the level of the middle of the 4th silver rank, and it is already comparable to Do-han, who has a biased attribute. In addition, Gluo's terrible recovery ability, completely disregarding his own injuries, as long as he avoids the fatal head and heart. Gluo's fighting style is extremely crazy, and he can beat Do-han to death in close combat. This is crossing Yan's bloodline. Hehe, but, very good. Your speed is only slightly slower than mine, but your strength is even stronger than mine. Heiku Do-han pulled away, and a narrow wound was cut on his cheek by Gluo's hand knife. His expression looked indescribably hideous. Just now, it was just a little bit short. If he tilted his head a little slower, then Gluo's hand knife would have cut his brain open, and he would have died directly. Gluo, I feel it. Your physical attributes are 4 times that of a normal second black iron stage evolver. It's amazingly powerful. The fear of death made Do-han seem like a different person. His mouth was split open, and the wound on his face was bleeding. He stuck out his tongue and licked his own blood. He was so excited that he was almost crazy. Yes, that's the feeling. For so many years, I almost forgot that death turns out to be this feeling. Praise death. Praise fear. Praise the creator of all this. Gluo, I really want to praise you. I will praise you. And then, kill you. I will eat your heart and remember you forever. Do-han's samurai sword had broken. He suddenly put the 5 fingers of both hands together, and the fingers turned into knives. He suddenly took a breath, and stabbed into his abdomen at the lowest end of his ribs without hesitation. Puff! The sound of flesh being pierced rang out. Standing opposite Do-han, Gluo felt hair all over his body. Is he going to commit suicide? The real butcher knife. At that moment, Do-han's hands pierced his stomach. He put his hands into the abdominal cavity and then slowly pulled them out. Blood. Red, sticky plasma. Blood kept flowing out, but Do-han was laughing, as if he didn't feel the pain. At this time, a pair of blood-red daggers were pulled out of his abdominal cavity by Do-han. Hehe. This is my real weapon. I call it butcher knife. At this time, Do-han's hands were full of his own blood. He tore his shirt open with both hands. He threw away the outer clothes, leaving only the lining, and then he tied the lining around his waist and tied a knot. Ah, it's really a familiar taste, a good life. Do-han seemed to have turned on a switch. He was no longer like himself. Unlike the chattering self just now, at this moment, he seemed to have only madness and the desire to kill. Heiku Do-han held the blood-red dagger called butcher knife in both hands. His upper body clothes had been torn off by him. The wound on his waist and abdomen was still bleeding, but after being tied up with clothes, the situation was much better. But it was precisely because Do-han was naked from the waist that Gluo was able to see that there was a lifelike big bird tattoo on Do-han's chest, abdomen, and ribs. No, that is no longer a tattoo, but a real living being. It is a bird of prey that looks like a sparrow or an eagle. Every feather seems to be real, and the science source of power flows on it, as if fermenting a certain consciousness. Its name is Fengxi Falcon, a 4th level disaster, silver level wild beast. It feeds on humans and lives on the vast plains. It is a bird of prey that means ominousness and death. Jialuo's expression finally lost its ease. He looked at Duhan in such a state, and his heart began to clear all the previous emotions. Only seriousness and calmness remained. Jialuo and Kichudi talked about the ranks of the evolvers, so he knew some secrets of the other world. Now, the lifelike tattoo on Duhan's body is not actually a tattoo. It is called a tattoo. Don't think that it is a tattoo on the body, and it hosts some power. Its essence is that the human body contains the power of the wild beast, from human to non-human. This is the truth, that humans can step into the 4th silver level. Chapter 324, Bird of the Wind. It's time to end it. At that moment, Duhan held a blood-red dagger in both hands. His face was ferocious, and he looked at Jialuo, as if he wanted to eat him. As he roared, the skeleton of the wind-breath falcon on his body seemed to be alive and glowed faintly. There was a faint wind flowing through him, and the feathers on the whole body of the wind-breath falcon were trembling. Duhan gritted his teeth, as if he was enduring some pain. His brown eyes began to change, from human eyes to bird eyes. At the same time, he completely lost the color of normal pupils and irises, and turned into pure cyan, the color representing the source of wind. The wind began to surround Duhan's body, and the source of power was like clouds lingering around him. His muscles were all bulging, as if some kind of power was flowing in his body. Welcome, death. At that moment, Duhan's eyes were no longer like human eyes staring at Jialuo. He put on a smile on his face and his body suddenly rushed towards Jialuo. I'm happy to accompany you. At this moment, as if he was sure that he had no way to retreat, Jialuo suddenly raised his right arm and pulled back. The air around him began to vibrate, and the invisible gravity began to gather on the fist of Jialuo's right arm, controlling the ultimate power of the universe. The next second, Jialuo did not hesitate at all, and swung his fist suddenly, as if under some heavy pressure. The ground and air in front of Jialuo began to collapse abnormally, and the force of gravity spread forward, as if it was going to crush everything like a rolling torrent. However, Duhan dodged. At this moment, Duhan, who had exploded all his trump cards, his speed had completely turned into a fast-moving phantom in Jialuo's eyes. Jialuo only saw a phantom bypassing his attack and rushing towards him. Jialuo suddenly raised his right arm and blocked in front of himself, but it was meaningless. Puff. At that moment, Jialuo's eyes opened wide, and he didn't know whether it was to see Duhan's figure clearly or to be shocked by his speed, and his body had been stabbed in the lower abdomen by a knife, and the force was transmitted, and Jialuo's body rolled and flew out. Ha 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 ha. Jialuo, are you happy? The dagger in Duhan's left hand was stained with Jialuo's blood. He picked up the dagger, licked the blade with his tongue, and showed a happy expression. Just now, Duhan seemed to have become a different person. If he was just a villain before, then at this time, he was already an out-and-out pervert. Ah. It's really happy. Jialuo lay on the grass. He supported his body with both hands, and slowly stood up. Really, amazing technique. It didn't even hurt the internal organs. How many people have you killed? Just like a doctor. Jialuo covered the wound on his stomach with his right hand, feeling the slight itch of blood and flesh growing and healing. He looked at Duhan's crazy expression, and he could still smile. Right, a long time ago, I was really a doctor. If you want, I can dissect you alive. Haha, I'd rather not. He don't say that. You are really what I'm looking forward to. Can you make me more excited? Duhan stood there with interest, looking at Jialuo's serious expression, holding the blood-red dagger tightly in both hands, but did not attack immediately. He is not a killer, but a real murderer. What he is happy and excited about is not the reward after killing, or other additional things. What he loves is just killing itself. He likes pure killing, likes to kill pure people, likes to watch people die in pain, likes to watch people die in begging, likes to watch people die in despair. And what makes him most happy is hope falling into despair, and then dying in despair. And now, at this moment, what he wants to give Gielluo is this kind of death. However, this is somewhat difficult, because at this time, under the effect of Xingan's blood, the wound on Gielluo's abdomen has completely stopped bleeding, the cells are rapidly dividing and growing, and the new flesh and blood are healing the wound. I'm still very optimistic about you, young man. Du-Han looked at Gielluo with a smile at this time. He has an absolute advantage in physical strength and source power. How could Gielluo turn the world upside down? It's a pity, you still have to die. After the smile, the look on Du-Han's face became cold. The blood-red double daggers rotated in his hands. His body tilted, as if he was about to fall forward. The next second he had disappeared on the spot. And at that moment, Gielluo, whose blood was boiling because of the injury, did not give in. He stepped forward, and his body rushed forward like an arrow from a string. If the scene at this time was seen from the sky, it would be as if two colored bullets rushed out of their respective gun barrels, facing each other. Killing intent seemed to dominate the two people, but the difference was that one person was for pure killing, while the other was seeking a breakthrough. In Gielluo's eyes, the time of contact could not be accurately predicted. He raised his right hand and swung it forward at the time point of the perception limit. At this time, Du-Han had also approached Gielluo. The killing intent on his face was strong. He avoided Gielluo's right fist at the moment of intersection, and at the same time, two bloody daggers accurately stabbed Gielluo. However, Du-Han still underestimated Gielluo. When the dagger was close, Gielluo actually made a basically impossible action for humans. His body fell forward, supported the ground with his left hand, and flipped in the air, directly avoiding the attack. What? Du-Han did not expect that his sure attack would fail. His body paused for a moment, and then rushed towards Gielluo again. At this time, the distance between the two was no longer that far. Gielluo had no weapon, nor did he need one. At this moment, all Gielluo was planning to do was punch. Du-Han's blade was slashing, and he dodged Gielluo's fist. The dagger in his left hand cut a deep wound on Gielluo's waist and ribs. But when he was about to pierce Gielluo's body with the weapon in his right hand, Gielluo's body suddenly turned, and his right fist swung down. Du-Han had to stop his body, and planned to retreat. However, at this moment, Gielluo's body suddenly stopped spinning. He turned his head to face Du-Han, and then rushed over like a beast. At this time, Gielluo did not dodge or avoid, he just wanted to hit Du-Han's head with one punch. Du-Han was now simply controlling the wind. How could Gielluo hit him? He dodged directly, and slashed Gielluo's shoulder with the dagger in his right hand. However, in Du-Han's consciousness, something unbelievable happened. At this moment, Gielluo seemed to have no feeling, like a puppet, as if his flesh and blood were not cut by the blade at all. His body did not tremble at all, but became faster. He just deliberately suppressed his speed. At this moment, the only thing left in Du-Han's mind was this horrifying thought. Chapter 325, No End. At that moment, Du-Han's body tilted, and he swung the dagger in his right hand, cutting a horizontal scar on Gielluo's shoulder. But Gielluo seemed to be unaware, and his body just rushed forward regardless of everything. Du-Han was thinking about the next move in his mind. Just when he was about to change his body posture and open up the distance again, Gielluo's speed suppressed him at a certain moment, limited by the matrix of the biological itself. Humans always use force in waves, and the force is a fluctuating line, not always straight. Even if Du-Han's body is fast, there are times when his condition fluctuates, so his speed can't always be constant at a value. It's like a 100-meter sprint and a 1,000-meter long distance race. Even if a person can run a kilometer at the speed of a 100-meter long distance race, in fact, because of muscles, strength, breathing and other conditions, his speed has to fluctuate, sometimes fast and sometimes slow. So at this time, it's not that Gielluo's speed has increased, but that he has always maintained the same speed. But Du-Han's speed has been exhausted, and there has been a significant decrease. With the blessing of Xingan's bloodline, Gielluo was like an inhuman god of war. His palm turned into a whip. Although Du-Han tried his best to avoid it, and kept his distance, he couldn't avoid it after all. Snap. With a crisp sound, Gluo's palm swung down vertically, and Du-han's chest seemed to be hit by a long whip, and the bloody wound split open instantly. How is it possible? Du-han looked at Gluo in disbelief. His body felt severe pain, but this pain became the cause of the outbreak. Du-han roared, stepped on the ground with his right foot, and flew backwards. Heh. Want to leave? At this moment, Gluo smiled like a demon. His body was tense to the limit, and his strength seemed to be inexhaustible. He ran forward, and jumped into the air. The next second, when Gluo fell down, the fist wrapped in source power went straight down. Boom. Du-han's speed was still faster than Gluo. Gluo's fist slammed deeply into the ground, but he didn't hit Du-han after all. However, Gluo was not surprised by this result. Without stopping, Gluo's speed was like crazy, chasing Du-han, who was constantly moving backwards. Time. At this time, Du-han kept dodging left and right, trying his best to distance himself from Gluo. He only needed a little distance to let him sort out the situation, and he would have the confidence to defeat Gluo. However, Gluo had no intention of stopping. Du-han had no time to think about it at this time. He didn't know why Gluo was so abnormal, but he had to deal with it. Normal people have time to breathe and accumulate strength, but the strength in Gluo's body seemed endless. He chased Du-han tightly. His body was terribly flexible. His right hand kept punching, whipping, and chopping, and his sander moves were used smoothly. Asshole. Du-han had no room to dodge at all. He had to gather all his source power and launch a fierce attack on Gluo to suppress Gluo's speed. Naturally, Du-han's plan succeeded, but in front of Gluo's right fist, Du-han's source force bombardment had no effect, which forced Du-han to climb up the wreckage of the collapsed old building, trying to distance himself from it. In the ruins, Du-han kicked off with his left foot, kicked down half of the broken wall, and pressed down towards Gluo, who was chasing below. Boom. However, facing such a huge concrete wall, Gluo had no intention of dodging. He rushed forward and punched the wall with his right hand. Is this the fourth silver revolver? That's enough. Du-han was still climbing up when he heard Gluo shouting. He was considering whether to lift up half of the wall and push it down, but before he could take any action, he heard a huge bang. When Du-han turned his head nervously, the half-broken wall had already collapsed in front of Gluo. At the same time, Gluo's figure rose again, sticking to Du-han's back, with no sign of being thrown off at all. Compared to Du-han jumping on different nodes of the ruins, Gluo crawled and jumped with his hands and feet. His body was in a blessed state, and his reaction speed was frighteningly fast, just like a monkey jumping in the woods. Du-han's speed was not as fast as Gluo's. Don't even think about running away. Gluo had already noticed that there was always a distance between him and Du-han. Due to the control power of the second Black Iron stage, he could not exert the full strength of his body. In that case, Gluo gritted his teeth and simply gave up the idea of fine operation, and began to use the power of Zingarn's bloodline to burst out with all his strength. It was like a car. Usually, we always drive at an average speed considering the wear and tear of the car and the risk of car accidents. It is impossible to really drive the speed to the limit. At this time, Gluo gave up the brakes and kept stepping on the accelerator, constantly accelerating until the highest speed, 100% of the limit. In this case, Gluo was like a manic and ferocious wolf. He just went straight forward and kept moving towards his prey. Boom. 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 Du-han kept trying to use the wreckage of the building to interfere with Gluo's movements, but Gluo just rushed forward. No matter what flew towards him, he would not dodge, or it was impossible to dodge. He would only smash or hit it away, and then, straight forward. Du-han tried to attack Gluo with his speed several times, and Gluo really couldn't dodge his attacks. Several times, he left wounds on Gluo's body. However, as long as there was bleeding on Gluo's body, the muscles would tighten quickly, and the bleeding would stop almost instantly, and then it would heal visibly. While recovering, Gluo would still attack Du-han desperately, and Du-han had no way to block Gluo's right arm. He would be injured if he touched it. In this way, Duhan left 7 or 8 wounds on Gluo's body, and a hole was stabbed in his waist. It's just a monster. Duhan's breathing gradually became heavier. Not to mention a wound on his cheek, but the wound on his waist did affect his condition. No, I can't go on like this. Duhan regained his fighting mindset at this time, or the crisis of death made him regain the need to think. Gluo, on the other hand, was like a wild beast at this time. He jumped and ran in the ruins. As long as he got close to Duhan, he would ignore his fierce attack. That kind of attack even made Duhan dare not fight back. Once he paused, because of the attack, Gluo would entangle him, and close combat could suppress him to death. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.